Good evening. Call to order the meeting of the Salem School Committee of December 1st, 2025, 7 p.m. This meeting is taking place in person at 29 Highland Avenue, room 227 in Salem. You can also join via Zoom using the link posted in the meeting agenda. First order of business is approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Motion made by Member Cornell, seconded by Member Campbell. Under discussion, seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? The agenda is adopted. The request to take out of order. Well, you want to start with it?
Yes, I'd love to just have a moment of silence. We lost a staff member on Friday, November 28th. A food service worker, Karen Cleary, who had been with us for a long time. She was an invaluable member of the Horace Mann community over the past several years, and she also worked at Collins Middle School before that. She brought warmth, dedication, and kindness to everything she did, and she will be deeply missed by all that had the privilege of working with her. She battled a long illness, and so our respects go out to her family and friends, I just ask for a moment of silence out of respect for Miss Karen Cleary, an employee of the Salem Public Schools and Food Service.
We're going to take out of order under Superintendent's report, item number 1, the Certificate of Academic Excellence.
Yes, thank you. It's my privilege every year to give out our Certificate of Academic Excellence. Every year, the state of Massachusetts, or the Association of School Superintendents, allows districts or superintendents to give out an award in their district for excellence. We are always given the opportunity to give out 2 awards, given our size. And the Certificate of Academic Excellence honors students who have demonstrated exceptional academic achievement, exemplary character, and meaningful contributions to their school and community. Local superintendents are invited to select deserving recipients, and the awards are often presented at a school committee meeting, and hence we are here tonight. The recipients must exemplify the following criteria. They must be a high school senior. They must have strong leadership qualities, impeccable character, and consistent pursuit of academic excellence. And I have in your packets, school committee members, a bio on each of the individual students. When I received the names from New Liberty and from Salem High School this year, I was very it was an easy to say yes to these, because these are both students that I knew of and had worked with in the past. And so I was really proud that these are the 2 folks that will be nominated here tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the bio of each individual, and I will ask each one to come up after I read their name so we can take a photo. I can present them with a certificate and some Salem Public School swag. I'm really pleased that their principals are here tonight and some staff from the school as well to honor these outstanding students. These are the very best in the Salem Public Schools, and I'm really proud to be able to recognize them, and I hope they're able to put this on their resumes and their college applications. So the first from New Liberty is Jay Thompson. Jay Thompson embodies the mission and values of New Liberty Innovation School. As a senior, he has shown exceptional growth across all portrait of a graduate skills: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creative problem solving, cultural competence, and self-awareness. Jay's strong leadership, impeccable character, and relentless pursuit of excellence have allowed him to engage deeply in real-life learning experiences, both about himself and the world around him, such as the Build Entrepreneurship class competitions that New Liberty participates in, the presentation to the Barr Foundation on New Liberty's components of competency-based education and how students track their proficiency, teaching the freshman class on the New Liberty Portrait of Graduate Skills, which are really the Salem Public Schools Portrait of Graduate Skills, engaging in deep reflective writing and conversations on the cycle of socialization, successfully completing an internship with MGB Salem Hospital, participating in a real estate certification course that will guarantee a certification upon completion in December, pursuing a health science degree post-graduation at either a 2- or 4-year institution, and being willing to face challenges such as public speaking, climbing a mountain, and adjusting to social changes. Jay is always a classroom leader, sharing his thoughts and taking risks, demonstrating vulnerability in group settings that sets the tone for others to do the same, and having high expectations for himself. He consistently contributes positively to his community and demonstrates the drive and skills to achieve his goals beyond graduation. Jay is a deserving New Liberty Innovation School senior recipient of the Superintendent's Certificate of Excellence. Jay Thompson. And then we'll invite the family to come up.
We're going to be in it.
All right, don't blink. 1, 2, 3. Excellent.
Okay, can we get Principal Kama, Miss O'Leary, Miss Davis, family? Can we get the whole group up here?
We're not shy.
No, I know.
You know.
You travel well.
You're not shy. Yeah, you're the mom.
Yeah, you should be here. Well,
All right, ready? And 1, 2, 3. Good. Excellent. So move. Good.
all right.
Yeah, you should be really proud.
Thanks, Jamal. Appreciate it. Okay, next up is Alexia Coleman. And I've known Alexia for the last few years. She's a member of the Student Superintendent's Advisory Group. I've had the privilege of working closely with her, and it's an honor to recognize her here today. Alexia is a dynamic, eclectic student who appreciates every opportunity to learn and grow academically as well as personally. She has challenged herself from day one and continues to build her academics, personal, and leadership skills every day. Alexia knows herself well and is willing to ask for and accept help from others. She's self-motivated, disciplined, manages her time well, and is a great team player on and off the wrestling mat. Alexia has a true respect for the ideals of good sportsmanship, and she never expects from others what she does not expect of herself. She has proven her time management skills with her ability to balance academics, school and community activities, athletics, as well as part-time employment. Alexia is committed to each and every endeavor that she becomes involved in. She takes each challenge seriously and always takes it to the next level of learning. It is these qualities that have earned Alexia the respect of her peers, the teaching staff, and the administration at Salem High School. She is one of the most sincere, committed, confident, and positive students in her class, and she will prove to be an asset to our college community and a credit to her chosen field of study, international relations. Two more things to say about Alexia before we bring her up. First of all, she is the first female wrestling captain in the history of Salem High School. Give it up for that. And secondly, I have to say, the first day she walked into my advisory group, I think 3 years ago, I remember saying, who is this person? I mean, I was so blown away by her maturity, her intellect, and just the confidence to really push my thinking around how to improve the school system, and it's been a real privilege to get to work with her, and she will be missed in the Salem Public Schools. So I'll ask Alexia to come forward, and then we'll do a photo with her family as well. Alexia Coleman.
You're making it worse. You're making it way worse.
Excellent.
Smile in the background.
1, 2.
All right, can we get Principal Burns, family?
I was thinking you just was going to, I was laughing at you. Sobbing, right? Just looking at him smile. Because you never
Did we get everybody
glass
in
you
there?
have. Crazy. Yeah, perfect. I think I might have been doing that.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Lovely. Good.
right. Now return to our regularly scheduled program. Our next item on the agenda is public comment. The Salem School Committee would like to hear from the public on issues that affect the school district and are within the scope of the committee's responsibilities. Spanish interpretation is available for anyone who needs it. The members of the school committee would like to remind the public that Salem Public School students regularly attend school committee meetings. We encourage all meeting participants to model respectful and productive public discourse for our young learners. We'll start with any comment in the room. And you can use the microphone over, you know where it is.
Please do not touch the mic. All right. Yes, I can read. First of all, good evening. My name is Lori Miranda, and I'm a very proud history educator at Salem High School. I've been working with teenagers for a total of 27 years, 20 of those here in Salem. I'm also someone that has struggled with mental health, mostly anxiety and depression. I am very open about my mental health struggles with my students so they know there is someone out there who understands what they are going through, but also to understand that it is okay to be open about those struggles and end the stigma. And I've also become a resource for students to go to when they're struggling with their mental health and provide support and get them help with trained adults in our building. Tonight, I am not speaking as a teacher, but I'm speaking on behalf of a phenomenal organization called Mental Makeover. As their president of their board, Mental Makeover is a mental health 501c3 nonprofit organization committed to fighting stigma surrounding mental health and empowering young people to learn about mental health and talk about their own thoughts, emotions, and experiences. This organization was started by two former Salem High School graduates that saw the need to end the stigma around mental health. At Mental Makeover, we have two major fundraisers. We do the World Needs You Here Walk, which is usually the end of July, and the other fundraiser that we do is a polar plunge in January. Both events help support college scholarships that are given to students not only at Salem High School, but at Essex Tech as well. And those scholarships are in the name of two former students that have committed suicide. Other events that we plan is we do programming such as yoga sessions, cookie decorating, guest speakers, school presentations. The founders of Mental Makeover have done numerous presentations here at Collins Middle and also at Salem High School. They also provide educational boxes for elementary students and the World Needs You Here boxes for middle and high school students. Mental Makeover education boxes are filled with interactive tools and activities striving to teach youth about mental health in an open, light, and easy to learn way. This box is not meant to replace the existing social emotional learning curriculums, but rather act as an engaging additional resource to enhance them. The World Needs You Here box is filled with activities, resources, and coping tools that can typically be found in a therapist's office and clinics that support an individual who is experiencing mental health struggles. Each activity includes personal words from our team members to show that the person using this box is not alone. We currently have boxes in schools all over the North Shore. In fact, we just dropped off about 20 plus boxes were delivered to our adjustment counselors at Salem High School. Hospital ERs like Salem Hospital and Tufts in Boston. Leap for Education was just delivered, I think, almost 20 or 40 boxes as well. We have boxes at homeless shelters, doctor office waiting rooms, and counseling offices all throughout the North Shore. I even have one of these boxes, the World Needs You Here box, in my classroom when students utilize them when they're struggling with their mental health. The reason why I'm speaking about all of this is because I would like to formally invite all of you, every school committee member, to be a part of our Polar Plunge in January. Whether you plunge, you volunteer, or you just come out and support the plungers, it really does make a difference. It doesn't matter how old you are or even how young you are. anyone can participate. The first year we did the polar plunge, I volunteered, and it was such a warm, wonderful, positive experience that I decided I was going to throw myself literally in the water and plunge. My goddaughter, who was 12 at the time, decided she wanted to do it as well. She was 12. She's now 14, and this will be our third year doing it, the plunge together. Plunging is a lot of fun, and it helps you to feel better, not only physically, but also mentally. So on Saturday, January 31st, 2026, at 10 a.m. out at Winter Island, Mental Makeover will be hosting our 4th annual Freezing for a Reason Polar Plunge. The Polar Plunge is done in loving memory of those that we have lost to suicide. For more information, please check out our website, mentalmakeovertoday.org, or see or email me for more information and details. And remember, you are not alone and that your life matters. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jade Bachman, and I'm a proud graduate of Salem Public Schools and the school nurse at Horace Mann. I'm here to share the nursing perspective on the proposed elementary reconfiguration. As a former SBS student who went through school transitions myself, moving from Bentley to Bowditch, I know how impactful these changes are for kids and families. Years later, I returned to SBS as a nurse because I wanted to give back to the community that shaped me. Since 2017, I've served in several roles across the district, including at Carleton and New Liberty, as well as the district's first float nurse. I've been able to support every school in the district and see the unique culture and needs of each building. I'm proud that today we have a full nursing team with 2 full-time float supports to keep our schools safe. But we need to be honest about the impact a reconfiguration has on school nursing. Our work is often behind the scenes, and because of that, it can be overlooked, even though nursing is one of the areas most affected. When Bowditch closed and students were dispersed across other buildings, nursing felt the impact immediately. We absorbed new caseloads overnight, updated care plans, and adapted to unfamiliar student needs with no transition period. A school merge is an even larger shift. Every student requires medical clearance, physicals, immunizations, medication orders, health histories, and updated healthcare plans. We prepare emergency plans, verify and secure medications, update emergency bags, complete staff trainings, and meet all state-mandated documentation, including screenings for every student. And that's before the daily work: injuries, illnesses, mental health concerns, chronic disease management, crisis response, and medical emergencies. Many of our students have complex medical needs, including tube feedings, seizure protocols, diabetes care, mobility supports, and daily medication routines. These are time-sensitive, legally regulated responsibilities. HMOS currently serves about 300 students. Adding nearly the same number more than doubles the clinical workload in one building. Reconfiguration doesn't reduce student health needs, it simply relocates them. For that reason, I strongly urge the committee to maintain full nursing staffing if a merge occurs. 2 school communities coming together still requires 2 sets of nursing resources to ensure safety, compliance, and equitable care. I also want to note that school nurses do not work over the summer. These changes must be fully planned before the school year begins because we return in the fall expected to immediately manage new students, new systems, and all medical clearances with limited preparation time. Our school nurses work tirelessly behind the scenes, and our presence is essential during a transition of this scale. Please ensure that nursing and the health and safety of our students remains central in any reconfiguration planning. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Melinda Baker. While I have spoken previously at one of these sessions, I'd like to reintroduce myself as a parent of a Carleton student and an active member of our school PTO. I want to provide some context as to why several community members are asking for a delay in the elementary school reconfiguration decision by speaking to the process of the past few weeks. And rather than speaking in terms of individual students' stories or anecdotes, instead speak to the system. And I'll use terms similar to your own, as have frequently heard these business terms from you, like right-size the district, the budget shortfalls, cost projections, and realize now that perhaps your original motivation was to pressure test different scenarios without considering the emotional turmoil that you've put families through in these last few weeks. So I want to give you then another business term, a business case, and ask you to consider a hypothetical. Instead of thinking about reconfiguration or mergers, think about how this body would put together a business case for a new school, much like what's probably ongoing for the new high school. As a concerned public, we would expect you to have done a rigorous traffic analyses, enrollment modeling, and then identify any of the relevant educational models, then in many other things. While you have answered a lot of relevant questions posed by many of the parents who you see then in front of you, several of us have routinely worked in the business community throughout this region. And while I can only speak for myself, I would most definitely deny that business case. This is why you've received pushback to merger proposals, because you haven't taken the logical next step to explain and plan for the new school that you would be creating. You've instead provided a speculative cost savings that don't even fill the next year's gap, let alone speak to any of the subsequent years. So all we're asking is that you do your homework and do right by our young learners now and in the future, then bring us a true winning business case. Do the work to gain the buy-in from our community. And I promise you, parents will get behind those plans and help you fund our schools and improve the education of the whole community. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Alexandra Dietrich. I am a proud parent of a Carleton E1, I almost said P2, he moved up, student. And I have lived in Salem for the last 9 years. I thank you all for hearing many people's personal stories, but I would like to share mine because my child has not always been verbal. When COVID landed, the day before the world shut down, we found out our son is autistic. He doesn't have anything, he is, just like we are. And there were no resources we could access. Just everything stopped, and we all went through it together. And at some point, we'll read a book about how none of us processed it fully, and it'll be life-changing. When it came time for the world to reopen, he attended the ECC, and we found Miss Lisa and a team of teachers who helped him go from nonverbal to verbal. It was incredible. When it came time to pick an elementary school, we were steered for his IEP to be at the one elementary school that could legally meet what his IEP said. This was Witchcraft Heights. I love that all parents who've been speaking up love their school. I did not have the best experience there because my son's autism was not profound enough to always get the attention in the ASD classrooms. All students deserve attention. All students deserve what they need to succeed. But his autism presented that he was, to use a very outdated term, higher functioning. We don't use that anymore. We know the harm that it causes, but it doesn't mean that people in his room paid attention to him first when a nonverbal student also needed something at the same time. His inclusion on his IEP was not met fully. We had such a struggle to explain to his teachers that he used to love reading, he used to love numbers, and inclusion time was being offered back to us at lunch, at recess. This was not where he needed inclusion. He needed it socially. He needed it in an academic room. After 2 years, we said, we can't do this to him anymore. His light went out. He hated going to school. He was receiving injuries in the classroom because people weren't paying enough attention to him, and because his word retrieval delay due to autism, and his own ability in the room to just advocate for himself was less verbal than potentially some of his peers his own age. He was falling through the cracks. I look at the numbers of what it could mean to merge elementary schools, and the numbers projected are higher than that of Witchcraft Heights. He was just a number at that school. And my heart breaks as an educator. I've taught from elementary music up to university level music. My heart breaks for the people who can't advocate for themselves verbally in a way that gets heard and gets absorbed. So we did what we had to take a gamble of doing and reject things from his IEP and place him at Carleton. And every teacher knows his name. When he has a sensory meltdown, they know how to use a subclassroom space. They know how to de-escalate. Small schools really do help make visible the neurodivergent, invisible peers that we have among us. I'm not saying that at some point fiscally that these smaller schools won't become larger schools. But all I can say is that from someone who has seen their child go from loving school to losing their inner light to regaining it and now being 2 grade levels above where he is in math, that was always in him. But when kids fall through the cracks because they are either too difficult in the room or too easy in the room and can be left to their own devices, this is what's at risk. All of these students at all of these schools deserve to be seen and loved and heard for who they are, and to be able to have a school that can see what they need because they know them. I've heard amazing stories from other elementary schools, so I can only speak from my own experience, but I fully love that those stories are shared. The Carleton helped my child stop self-harming, helped him be social among his age group. All he wanted was friends. I wanted him to succeed at everything, but at the end of the day, all he wanted was friends. Now he has everything that he could ask for. And I've been very honest at home about what's going on because he doesn't do change easily. When he was a baby, if I turned his stroller back somewhere we'd already come from, he would have a meltdown. And it wasn't throwing a tantrum, it's just his sensory wiring. So I have to say, please consider that this vote really does impact those tiny numbers on such a huge level. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to offer comment, it's a 5-minute limit.
Hello, my name is Tatiana. I am a Carleton parent. I am a Salem resident, and I've been through this school. I've been through Salem High, and I've been through Witchcraft. I have family that's been through Bates. I have family that's taught in these schools, and I've been here about 19 years in America and Salem altogether. I currently have a wonderful 7-year-old that goes to Carleton, and I was somebody that went through schools and wasn't met where I should have been met. I struggled with ADHD, and I struggled socially, being bilingual, and it was constantly a battle, being present, being there, trying to fit in, trying to catch up. But one thing I was always good at was math. And I used to get in trouble for that. I had a teacher that read my book because I did most of the math work. And I had teachers that wouldn't give me extra work because I was already done. I got in trouble for finishing work and reading books under the desk. And then I was also the kid that went into high school and said, why am I doing this? I'm not being met where I'm supposed to be. And I struggled really, really bad, where I almost dropped out. And I didn't drop out because of wonderful Mr. Buchanan. Oh, well, like everybody here probably knows him if you. Hi. And he was the reason why I didn't drop out. And I realized why. I was in a smaller classroom. I got the attention I needed. It's not like I'm somebody that can just, that has struggle making friends or doing what I want to do. I had struggle I had the biggest struggle being in the room with a lot of kids. A lot of kids that would talk, that didn't care what they were doing, or there's only one teacher per, 20 students, if not more, based on the classroom. And I didn't do well. But being in smaller classrooms, shorter classes, getting extra teachers, having the space, if I needed to do my work by myself, to step outside and sit outside or be in a different part of the classroom to focus on what I needed to do, it worked for me a lot. When my son started school, he got accepted as a pre-K to Bates. Great school. Might work for some, didn't work for us. And one of the reasons was I do believe my son sometimes might be smarter than me. And especially if he keeps going like this. And one thing he would come home and say, Mama, we're not doing math. We're not doing science. And as time progressed, his attention in school started to go down. My first choice was always, before Bates, was Carleton, because I love the aspect of innovation and how it's structured, smaller classes, teacher support. There was just so much about that school that just drew me. And we are on our second year there. And my son, I could not be any happier about how he gets math. He gets to do the hard work when it comes to math. He's great at it. He's almost at second grade. He's only in first, but he's almost at second grade math. He wants to be a quantum physicist, and that's been like that for 2 years now. So I think my point is that if we merge these schools without making a plan on how it's going to affect these students, whether they're neurodivergent or whether they're not, it's going to affect everyone. And I don't want to see my son or those who were like me or like him or some of these wonderful parents that I've built relationships and have been talking about it, how it's going to affect all the schools here, all the parents, I think merging may not be an answer, but having a plan to do so is, and I don't think our city is ready for that. I also do know, living here and experiencing the Halloween, I know that we can make a little space in the budget for certain programs if that's what's needed. But again, it needs to have a plan. I've read over 500 text messages in weeks. There's days I wake up and my phone is blowing up for 100 text messages because parents are breaking everything down and there's no real answers. And I don't think that's okay. I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair to the kids, and I don't think it's fair to the staff that is going to be affected by this.
That's
Yeah,
5
of
minutes.
course.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Ide. My pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the parents of a 7-year-old public school student. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to speak in support of our public schools. It's good that so many of us have come together. We've been coming together, haven't we, folks? At a time of year that can feel hectic. It feels hectic as a routine, and it's so difficult to make time to slow down, show up, and do the important work of civic life together. Maybe that sense of urgency and overwhelm is something we all have in common. Is it? Yeah. And maybe everyone here is at least somewhat stressed out about what brought us here this evening. Something I've noticed is that stress can be isolating, even when it's about an issue that's widely shared. Who doesn't care about our kids? No one. We're all in this together. It's almost as if some of us, most of us, never really outgrow the sense that we can stay out of trouble if we follow a command to keep your eyes on your own paper and no talking. There's a reason that some of the most common nightmare scenarios involve test taking and other situations that are all pressure and no collaboration. Stress isolates individuals, and it forces groups into silos where focus and urgency can build up barriers into an us versus them mentality. When we're struggling with our most important problems, especially when they involve our kids, that's when it's most important to get out of that test-taking mentality and get into a conversation. I hope that our meetings have breathed some life into some of these statistics, line items, and data points by sharing our stories, and that we're all here, all of us, because we care about Salem's children. We're still learning, after all. For example, at the Chapter 70 hearing, dozens of other cities and towns of Massachusetts are struggling to fund their public schools too. And as a newcomer, this came to me as a huge surprise. Massachusetts has a national reputation for excellent public schools. That's part of why my family made our home here. There's no substitute for the benefits of stability and community toward our kids' education. And issues of disruption put to scale are part of why researchers at George Washington University and several others found school closures, whether they are called mergers, reconfigurations, or something else, to have profound and lasting negative outcomes for the whole community, like lower test scores and graduation rates, increased episodes of violence, and worst of all, the harm done to a generation of children whose leaders treated their needs like expenses to be minimized rather than an investment in our most precious collective resource. For kids who already have a challenge at accessing their education, and I would say that applies to literally anyone who survived a pandemic or has parents who remember it, and more directly, the populations like our schools serve. All of those repeated shocks build up and deplete their resilience at a time when they're growing up and working so hard in school that they really need it. Someday, today's children will be our doctors, our plumbers, our legislators, and our teachers. And giving them what they deserve right now takes more than money. It takes the dedication of a team who believes that we can do things that are important to all of us. And so let's work together as a community to balance the budget by finding somewhere else to save a buck and protect all of our public schools. Our kids are worth it. Thank you.
Any further comment in the chambers? If you have any comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand function.
Hi, I am a 7-year-old and I love my school. And if they combine schools, it's not worth it for us kids. And if we do that, kids will be bullied a lot.
All good? All right. So we've been joined by one member who's participating remotely, Member Manning, so votes will be by roll call vote. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the consent agenda. These are the minutes of the regular school committee meeting of November 3rd, the minutes of the forums of November 17th and November 24th, the approval of some donations, and the warrants of November 6th, November 13th, and November 20th. Member Cruz?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Seconded by Member Miranda. A roll call vote. Member Cruz?
Yes.
Member Miranda?
Yes.
Member Manning? Member Hoffman?
Yes.
Member Campbell?
Yes.
Member Cornell?
Yes.
Myself, yes.
Yes.
Unanimous. Student representatives report.
Yes, Sydney could not be here today, but I did meet with her today because I met with the advisory group today, and I can just give a quick update. We're working on a project, or they're working on a project about welcoming new students to Salem who come after the start of the school year. They did host a luncheon that they didn't feel like was well attended by the new students because they didn't feel like they did a good enough job promoting the luncheon. So we got to work on other ways of getting the message out. But they did meet today with Laura Assad, with Kathleen Silva, who runs our parent information system, and Anna Gratero, who is is the face of our college and career counseling center at Salem High, to really pick their brains about how we welcome new students to the system who come in the middle of the year. So far, Salem High School has welcomed about 24 students after the start of the school year, and so they're just they want to find ways to do a better job of like onboarding them, to continue to like connect them to mentors, connect them to buddies, because they are very clear about how overwhelming it is to come be new. And the lingo that the school uses and how confusing it is and how to figure out how to access all the activities. And so we are going to interview willing students, newcomers, at our next meeting to really understand from them what they need. And they're going to be putting together a system for that. I know Sydney would say if she were here that she's really wants to make sure that the bylaws are updated because they need work. And she says she that's her commitment before she leaves, to make sure that the bylaws are set. And they have invited 5 ninth graders to join the advisory group because there are a number of seniors who are leaving and they want to bring on the next wave. So they've invited ninth graders. And then finally, we tentatively talked, and I can talk to the school committee about this after, about a Zoom with the school committee next Monday at 5:30. Where some of them are available. Their schedules are busier than mine by a lot. But even if I could get 5 or 6 of them to be available, they know that you want to meet with them, school committee, about just their concerns and questions and so forth. So tentatively, I'm going to ask for those members that are available at 5:30, which is before the meeting the mayor will talk about later tonight, and on December 8th. I'll send that out to you tomorrow just to confirm that at least some of you might be available for that Zoom with them. So, yeah, that concludes the student advisory representative report. I'm certainly not as adept at Sydney at giving the report, but I did my best at getting through. So.
We are up next, superintendent's report.
All right, superintendent's report. Before we get into I do want to, while Lori Miranda's here, and of course she's so humble that she comes up to the microphone and doesn't acknowledge the fact that she received a really impressive recognition. She was named to the Holocaust Museum Boston Teacher Advisory Council. The museum is not even opened, but it's projected to be complete by the end of 2026. And she's part of the inaugural team to be a teacher advisory member to support the Director of Education. I think this is a tremendous honor for her. She is a real expert in the Holocaust. We're really lucky to have her here in Salem. She's a gift to our students. So I just want to give Ms. Miranda a big round of applause. She never brags about herself, but I'll do it for her. So we're grateful for all the work. No one puts in more time in professional learning outside of school than Miss Miranda does. And so I also love following her adventures around the world on Twitter, so I would, or whatever it's called now. But I would encourage you to follow because you'd learn a lot about the world. So congratulations to Miss Miranda. My comments tonight start off with an update on the FY26 budget. A few meetings ago at one of the forums, we gave an update on projections for FY27. We have a very, very challenging budget also in FY26. And every year, though, around this time, we do give you an update of where we stand. It's not a very long presentation, but we can certainly give more backup. But we want to give you a sense of where we are for FY26, which is the current fiscal year. We knew going into this year it would be challenging, and it's proven to be the case because we can never predict many of the things that happen during the course of the year, and we have to make adjustments based on the needs of students that are often unforeseen before the school year starts. So with that, I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Pauly.
Great. Thank you very much, Superintendent Zreich. I am joined here tonight by Camilla Salazar, who's our Director of Financial Operations, and the two of us are leading the team that stewards our financial work, including the analysis of FY26 and 27. So we hope to be able to answer whatever questions you have this evening. I wanted to start with just a reminder about what our budget looks like. On the slide, you can see our total general fund appropriation, which is $78 million. Most of that is personnel, and personnel includes all salaries, stipends, longevity payments, etc. Non-personnel is everything else: the lights, the curriculum, the materials, the transportation, etc. So in the blue box, I have noted that 72% of our personnel budget is still available. So that's good news. Although it's still very early in the year, and that will be the theme that you hear from me throughout these slides. There is 72% of our personnel budget available, but most of our staff is school-based or school year-based. So I would expect to have at least that much available at this point in the year. And I would note, and I'll get into this further in the subsequent slides, we are in fact over budget in our personnel budget. And I'll dig into why and how that is. But briefly, we've added new positions as we've opened school and needed to pivot and respond to student needs. We've hired new staff who make more than their predecessors and what was budgeted. We've seen shifts in grants as well. And so that's the personnel. We are, in fact, on track to be over budget. We do see a deficit in our personnel lines, but we do expect to end the year balanced. And I'll talk more about how we're going to get there. The non-personnel vertical bar is 29% expended. And the reason I've phrased these differently is in personnel, we don't encumber our money, so we pay as we go. But in non-personnel, we open up purchase orders that could take us all the way through to the end of the year. So it is a little bit apples to oranges here, but we have spent about 30% of our non-personnel budget. We are on track to balance, although there are a few budget lines in non-personnel that are substantially over budget. And so we do expect to see a deficit there too. We do expect to end the year on balance in non-personnel as well as personnel. We assume that we will be able to balance, and we assume we will be able to do that by taking steps now and in the coming months to make sure that we do. So we're going to monitor our expenses carefully, and we assume also that we will, at some point in the year, impose a budget freeze so that we're very carefully monitoring any new unnecessary expenses. So let's start with personnel. Approximately 3/4 of our budget is funding for our roughly 970 employees. About 3/4 of those are school year and the rest are year-round. So for the people who work this school year, they've only received about 6, when I pulled this information, 6 of their 26 paychecks. So when I say they're 72% available, it's because most of our payroll is still very new. It is early, as I said, and the reason we're projecting a deficit here and that we are over when we play this out through June, we think that the deficit is about $700,000 in our personnel line. So we're about $700,000 over if we project out to June. And why we think that is, a variety of things that I've listed here on the slide. So first, the lane changes to recognize professionals who have received or who have earned, I should say, credits, additional degrees. Those happen after the budget. That timing happens. Those come in September. We have seen salary adjustments for staff on individual contracts, so contracts that had expired were renewed, many of them at higher rates. We've seen new positions added due to enrollment changes, so students moving into the district who require a one-to-one paraprofessional, a new kindergarten class, etc. I did mention we've seen staff hired at higher rates than what was budgeted. This has added about $300,000 to our budget. And then the last, I think, contributor to how we have come to be over budget in our personnel budget is in our PSRP contract, we note that PSRP members work the student day. That was part of our collective bargaining agreement. However, for safety reasons, there are PSRP members who are needed to safely greet the students, help them transition into school, and then the same at the end of the day. And so when we add up the 20 to 30 minutes per day needed for safe arrival and dismissal, that could be another $155,000 beyond what had been budgeted because it lengthens the workday for these employees who are needed for student safety. So those are some of the contributing factors to our personnel overages. Another note on personnel, oops. Carlos, am I pointing it in the wrong place? Aha, thank you. Is our substitutes budget. So we are concerned about our substitute budget lines these years. On the left-hand side of this chart, I show the $250,000 we have budgeted from the general fund for daily subs. So somebody is sick, they're out, we get a sub. On the right-hand side, where you see $90,000, that is the budget line for long-term subs. So when someone is out for more than 20 days, the sub who has been covering becomes a long-term sub and is paid at a different rate. They're paid on the step-in column for the teacher's contract, as opposed to the daily sub rate of $130 a day. We have seen a couple of phenomena this year that has made us very confident we will be over budget in our sublines. The first is, and this is a good thing, but it is putting pressure on our budget, we do pay retired teachers the daily rate that they retired at. And we had 0 to 1 retired teachers subbing last year, and now we have 8. And that is great, but that they get paid a significantly higher rate than that $130 a day. So that accounts for about 40% of what we spent on our subs so far. And I pulled this, this is through November 7th. So it's actually, we've probably spent more on subs since November 7th. So that's one of the contributors to us being over budget. The second is we've seen many more leaves in schools this year than even last year. In fact, we've seen twice as many. And this includes FMLA as well as parental leaves. And in those instances, we have long-term subs. So just getting more long-term subs is also putting pressure on the sub budget. So I assume that these two lines will go into the negative. Again, we're assuming we can meet this deficit by transferring funds, which we'll do towards the end of the year. But these two lines I expect will be significantly over budget. That is the update on personnel. So on non-personnel, as I mentioned, it's everything that isn't an individual's pay, salary, stipends, differentials. This is about a quarter of the budget, and it goes to materials, utilities, transportation, hardware, software, special ed tuitions, etc. You can see that we're 71.7% committed, and this was about a week ago that I pulled that information. But that includes both what we've actually spent as well as what we've encumbered. So our real actual spending, dollars out the door, is about 33% at this point in the year. The rest of that is encumbrances. You would expect to see us at about 33% at this point in the year because some of our expenses are in fact 12-month. We pay utilities all year long, for example. Now I highlight this next non-personnel budget line because we've talked about it as a body a lot, and I am here tonight to tell you I am not concerned about our homeless transportation costs. So we often flag transportation, and there is a transportation slide coming that I am concerned about. But at this moment, we are not concerned with our transportation for students experiencing homelessness. And that is likely due to the fact that we have fewer students experiencing homelessness. In both September and October, and those were the only 2 months that I had full data for, we had fewer students experiencing homelessness and or in foster care. So the chart is very small on the right-hand side, but it is September and October comparing this year to last year. But in October, for example, our total number for both students experiencing homelessness and students in foster care was 224 compared to 296 at the same time last year. So I believe that accounts for the decline in our numbers. We've spent about $25,000 less at this time than we had last year. When we think about what is contributing to this, and I did speak with our McKinney-Vento coordinator about what she thinks is behind this. She did note that many more of our families are housed. So many of our families that were formerly experiencing homelessness are now housed, and that is great news. This could change, these numbers could change as new homeless shelters come online, so we'll watch this line carefully because this has been a significant cost driver in years past, but for now, we are not concerned about this line. Electricity is also something that we often talk about here, and I would note on the left-hand side, you can see that 88% of our funds are encumbered, but this is a change because in previous years, we've never encumbered our utilities. We didn't have to, although the rest of the city did, so now we have aligned our practice with the city's practice and encumbered our funds. It does appear that our expenses and our usage are on track to stay within our budget. So that, at least as of December 1st, is a huge relief, and we will continue to monitor that closely. So here's what I am concerned about, and that is in-district transportation for students in our special ed programming. So since September, we have added 6 wheelchair vans and 6 monitors, which has increased our monthly cost by $56,000, and we project that will put us about $400,000 over budget in this particular line. Now, we are committed to and legally required to safely transport students, so we're going to look at whether there are ways to make the routes more efficient without compromising student safety or the student experience on the bus. But if we have to maintain these additional vans and monitors, then we'll have to transfer funds later in the year to make this line whole. But this is where we see in non-personnel the largest overage so far this year. So, as we look ahead to the rest of FY26, the bottom line is that at this moment, we are projecting to be over budget in both personnel and non-personnel. We are assuming we'll institute a budget freeze at some point in this year to slow our spending and ensure that we'll end the year on balance. It's still early. We'll monitor our spending carefully, and things could change. Expenses could come in below what we have projected, or they could come in higher. We are now, in addition to analyzing our routes for in-district special education, we're also looking closely at any expenses that can be charged to grants as a strategy for balancing our budget. So that could also change the amount of what we assume our deficit to be. So at this point, we are committing to provide you with ongoing information, but most certainly another update as we get deeper into the winter and have a clearer picture about what the back half of the school year will look like. And of course, this connects to FY27, partly because we often use any surplus funds to prepay special education tuition for the next year. And so as we think about where we stand, we also have an eye toward, will we have any funds to be able to prepay tuition? So I guess I'll just say, one last time, we're monitoring it very closely. We'll be paying careful attention to all of this, and also we'll be very eager to see what happens in January with our Chapter 70 projections for next year. So I will leave it there and happy to answer any questions for now or, for follow-up.
Questions? Member Cornell?
I just have one question on the personnel number. Did you say it was 700,000 over? What does that look like? You don't have to answer this right now. I mean, you can, but I'd like to know what the difference is between that number right now and what we were looking at last year, what that gap was.
I'd like to look at that and respond as a follow-up, but my first reaction is it is much higher than what we would have seen last year, but I'll save my final answer for a follow-up.
Member Cruz?
Thank you. And I first got to acknowledge the good efforts that have been done on the substitutes. I think it's a big challenge for us last year, and we partnered with SDU to get the word out. So glad to hear that our retired educators are coming to fill in the gaps. You had mentioned on that particular front that you had saw an increase, most likely related to FMLA parental leaves as well, but then you just said there's other just general leaves that are taking place.
There are twice as many leaves, so
Twice as
that
many leaves.
was inclusive of all leaves,
All leaves.
FMLA and parental.
Would you be able to share with the committee kind of, since we've enacted the contract, I know one of the big priorities was around parental leave, FMLA. Can we just get a breakdown of like what's been that uptake?
Sure.
From those new provisions across the units? And then my other piece would be, you had mentioned that that there were some shifts in grants. What were the shifts? Was it state grants, federal, philanthropic? Just trying to get a sense of what that was.
Yeah, what I meant by that was, we get a certain amount for, say, Title I every year, and that we find out in the fall. Our salaries go up in the spring, so we don't always have real-time information about, well, our salaries don't go up in the spring. Our salaries also go up in the fall, but when we're projecting out what the salaries are going to be for the fall, we don't have our final Title I numbers for the next year. So sometimes if somebody's salary has gone up, then a larger portion of their salary has to go onto the general fund versus fully on a grant. And I just used Title I as an example, but that happens across our grant portfolio.
Okay, understood. And then you had mentioned that at some point you'd recommend, and I know that the Budget Subcommittee Finance is probably getting together to talk about next year's budget and probably diving into the weeds on this, but could you give us just like a general sense of like when you anticipate the budget freeze would take place? Is that like?
The last 2 years we've done it, we did a budget pause in January to assess where we were, but the freeze came later, closer to April. We don't have a hard, fast date, but probably sooner rather than later.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, and can I just also jump in? I mean, we're also looking at not filling certain positions that are not like critical for student needs. We're shifting roles currently as well, where, like for instance, our multilingual learning population has shifted, and so we're, instead of filling every open role that we have, we're also looking at, utilizing our staff, differently if caseloads have dropped in different places. We have to be judicious. I mean, some of it is like, the contract that we settled a few years ago. We're now really seeing this school year, in the first, we settled right before the beginning of last school year, but a lot of the aspects of the contract went into effect this school year. And so, leave provisions and salary adjustments are really hitting now. And so it's giving us a better sense of what our, costs will be for certainly next year as well. But we have to be really thoughtful about how we use, the resources we have. Our enrollment also went up, so we had to make adjustments in terms, and Jen Doucette-Lee, who we should get in front of the committee at some point soon, is the best position to tell you about how, with move-ins and unexpected needs, we have to service the needs of the kids in front of us. And, many folks did move in over the summer and also are moving in every day that require services. And so we've had to make, adjustments there in terms of staffing and opening new classrooms, particularly around special education. While our multilingual learning population has dropped a little bit, or at least is not growing in the same way it was, our special education population and students who have significant needs and involved IEPs has grown, and we have an obligation and a responsibility to meet their needs. And so that's something where, I think it would be worthwhile for Jen to come to a committee meeting in the future to share that information with the committee.
Any further questions from the committee?
Do you want to give your other finance updates?
Transfer.
Oh, yes. Thank you. So we have in the packet a request for a series of budget transfers. They total above our threshold, which is why we're bringing them to you, and also they're, in some instances, transferring across non-personnel to personnel. So the first is transferring from student supports contracted services, which is a non-personnel line, to stipends to help fund safety care stipends. The second is moving funds from instructional supplies to a stipend line to fund multilingual student tutors at Salem High School. Bentley has requested to move funds from their non-personnel to stipends to support the stipends, a range of funds they will need for the remainder of the year. And then the last is our music department needs to transfer funds from stipends to contracted services because the piano accompanist is not an employee of the Salem Public Schools, and therefore we can't pay them as a stipend, we have to pay them as a vendor. So it's a collection of things that we hope you will consider.
No further questions? All right. Back to you.
All right, MSBA update just quickly on the high school building project. The committee met on Thursday, November 20th. We reviewed the schedule, the milestone schedule. There was a robust discussion about field surfacing and the use of turf for natural grass at the site. Still getting some information from members of the committee before a final decision is made. We reviewed the schematic design submission table of contents. The total budget project format and estimates were reviewed. And what we're moving forward on is completing the final design for schematic design submission, which is on track for the due date of December 17th to the MSBA, which is a significant milestone. And there is a meeting. We have two meetings in the next 2 weeks in anticipation of the 17th. There is a Zoom meeting on Wednesday this week, 6 to 7 on Zoom, and then Thursday, December 11th, right here in the chambers. These are all public meetings for the public to attend. And so, yeah, we're a lot is happening with the building project as well. So stay tuned. Those concludes my comments, Mayor, and I know next on the agenda is elementary reconfiguration. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks. So I'm going to just start with a brief statement for the committee, and then we'll get into some questions for the consultants and for the district about what we've been presented with in November. First, I want to say thanks to the elementary school communities, the caregivers, the educators, and most importantly, the students, and to everybody who's provided feedback to this point. These discussions are the outcome of a process that began with a district facility master plan in 2021, continued through multiple retreats and committee meetings looking at our portfolio of facilities in the light of budgetary challenges, new models of learning, building needs, and declining student enrollments district-wide. That process has led to a number of important decisions for our community, not the least of which was the decision in 2023 to pursue a new Salem High School building. Many other components of our district's trajectory since then have also been shaped by the foundation of that effort, including the ongoing review of school assignment policies, transportation plans, or capital budgeting priorities, and a conversation about Salem's elementary school buildings. Earlier this year, 2 specialists in the field, themselves Salem residents and parents, were brought in to assist the committee in examining the data and the opportunities for actions that might help address our financial challenges, minimize the need for staff reductions, which would increase class sizes across the district, and maintain or even expand student access to our most successful programs. In evaluating the options before us, or whether or not to act at all, the school committee is centering the same values we have centered for years: equity, elevated learning experiences for every child, and financial sustainability. I want to acknowledge that conversations about changes to schools are emotional ones. As a parent of Salem Public School kids, I know how much we all love our schools. They shape our children's lives. And the heartfelt feedback we've heard from many of our elementary school families speaks to how much they care for their schools and how well the programs in those buildings are working. I also understand how important it is to make sure every child is supported to the best ability of our district. I have confidence we can navigate this process and land in a place where all kids in all of our schools have the greatest possible opportunity to thrive, succeed, and grow, no matter the address of the building that they go to school in. At one of our recent public forums, a parent asked the committee, "What is the vision?" It's a great question. Our vision is for a diverse and welcoming community that promotes each student's academic, social, emotional, and physical development through the equitable delivery of challenging, relevant, and joyful learning experiences. Those aren't my words. That is the district's mission statement. They're the foundation of the strategic plan that's guided our work for these past 2 years, and that's centered on 4 core priorities: elevated learning, empowering educators, centering belonging, and strengthening our district's foundations. The reconfiguration discussion is an extension of that vision and that strategic plan, not an outlier from them. And it's part of the actions that this committee and preceding committees and many, many thoughtful and dedicated educators and caregivers from across our district have been putting into place for years at every grade level. Expansion of the ECC and more in-district pre-K classrooms in our public schools, combined with the pre-K partners in our community, so we can achieve our goal of every child having access to the highest quality pre-K and early education opportunities possible. Broadening opportunities for as many Salem children as possible to benefit from innovative learning, dual language options, and other programs that have proven effective and are demanded by families. Aligning our middle schoolers into a building where every one of them has consistent access to programs, specialists, and opportunities, and where was once a pilot program for experiential learning and which has proven wildly successful has been expanded so every 7th and 8th grader can benefit from it. Moving our alternative high school to a safer and more conducive facility, and creating a new Salem High School that's intentionally built to support the career and college readiness programs that have, over the last 5 years, drawn back 160 students to Salem High School, an increase in our enrollment there of 20%. So that's the vision for our district: pre-K opportunities for every Salem child, equitable access to the best possible elementary programs for every family that seeks them, a middle school experience that gets kids enthusiastic and engaged in learning, and a high school that prepares them to succeed and thrive, no matter their chosen path. All of that with the strong foundation that was mentioned in the strategic plan: competitively compensated educators, safe and healthy buildings, financial sustainability, and a commitment to always being open to new ideas and hard conversations. I'm going to open the floor to committee members if they wish to make any statements or to ask questions to the district or the consultants. We're going to go one at a time, so folks each have an opportunity to ask their questions. And I'd like to invite the consultants to maybe come on up. After we've exhausted the questions from the committee, we'll have a further discussion amongst the committee members, and then I'll share some upcoming opportunities for additional public engagement that we're scheduling. So I will now open the floor to anyone who wishes to start from the committee. Member Cornell.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah and Dan, for being here. So my question is around one of the proposals that you said wasn't the best idea. And I just want to preface this by saying I'm not necessarily, by asking this question, it doesn't mean I want to put it back on the table. I just would like a little bit more clarity. So as you know, when we all held our June retreat, and we sort of gamed out different scenarios for reconfiguration, the one that we walked out the door with that we felt was pretty viable was to combine Carlton and Saltonstall at Horse Man and to move, no,
Bentley.
thank you. to combine Saltonstall and Carleton students at the Bentley School and to move the dual language program to the Saltonstall School. And it was one of those proposals that we all kind of, I think, felt pretty good about when we walked out the door, not just because of the financial implications, but because it could potentially solve some of the roadblocks that we see around equity and access, which we've been talking about for years with regard both to dual language and to the Carleton Innovation Plan. So just with that in mind, I can now see, given some of your other proposals, why this might not have risen to the top, but I would just like a little bit more clarity as to why you pulled that. That one was a do not recommend.
I'll start. Thank you, committee members. We are excited to continue to answer all your questions. That one involved moving a really significant portion of the elementary school students in the district all at once. And so it was sort of a larger impact than some of the other scenarios in terms of the number of students who would have a change. It also had some other features that maybe made it just slightly less appealing than some of the other ones. And also, I will say personally, I thought that since we looked at the fact that Bentley has not received as much update and support over the years in terms of the facilities updates, there also could be a concern about you're finally updating that building and the Bentley students aren't there to benefit from it, and that community wouldn't be there to benefit from it. But the biggest thing is really just about it moves so many students, and I think it's over 700 students would be involved in that one specific scenario. Is there anything you would add?
Just about the equity piece, this is where some of these things are in tension. So in moving Bentley to Saltonstall, that feels like an equity win by being so close to many of our Spanish-speaking families in the Point and in South Salem. But the literature often shows that when a school that previously had predominantly Latino students in it, those students move out, that's when schools get improved. And so again, that equity concern, is it reproducing a bit of what we heard loud and clear about Bowditch with a certain demographic of students. In this case, fortunately, a heralded program, but nonetheless, concentration of Latino students, moving out to have other families with less Latino demographics move into an improved building.
Thank you.
Member Cruz?
My question's around the innovation plans themselves. Under the state law, what are our options with respect to innovations plans when considering mergers, closures, and reconfigurations?
Thank you for that question. So I'm going to try not to be too complex about this. So innovation schools, the concept is that it is governed locally by the school committee. So the state sets up the rules for how they work, but it is locally that the decisions about any individual innovation school happen. So it is possible to amend innovation plans. There's language in the state regulations about the superintendent and the school committee can work with the school to amend an existing plan. That is certainly doable.
Okay, thank you. And then I think this question's better suited for the mayor and for the superintendent. I think one of the things that we're all wrestling with is obviously the larger budget landscape and the budget development process for the committee. Obviously, we've heard from the consultants that they recommended, tackling this conversation and then moving to the budget. But what is the timeline exactly for kind of the mayor, the council, and superintendent to align on what the projected city contribution is on the budget side?
I mean, it would be pretty consistent with the timetable from last year. So what was it, Elizabeth? It was...
Well, Chapter 70 comes out at the end of January,
For
and
House
then
One.
in February, March, we worked together, and then we brought the budget to this committee the very first week of April.
Yeah, and I don't think, and Mayor, you can jump in, I don't think, we're not anticipating major changes in the state's allocation for this year. I mean, we've been tracking it for the last couple of years. I mean, I think it's going to be relatively consistent. This is, I think, the second to last year of...
This is the last year.
This is the last year of SOA, even though we haven't seen much. Our enrollment has increased a bit, so we'll see a little bit of a bump there, but it will be consistent with what we've seen for the last few years. So we're not, I mean, our projections, we've used essentially the projections that the city has given, what the city's given us over the last few years as a starting place, unless there's a huge windfall, which we're not anticipating. I think our projection will probably hold, true to the last couple of years in terms of the city giving us between, 4.5% and 5%.
Thank you. And I understand that part of the conversation around that is work that happens both with the city finance director and then on our side in the district. But I think one question I got from members of the community is like, where in the process would members of the community be able to advocate with the council about, their interest in seeing the city contribute more to the budget? I understand we're going to have a number of transitions on the council because of the previous election cycle. So, Mayor, I don't know if you can illuminate kind of the process of budget development with the city council and kind of how they think about those decisions, given the, I think, growing interest of, I think, the incoming city councilors on this particular topic. Just want to make sure that folks have an understanding of when they can kind of interject and kind of influence the process.
So with the city council, that process doesn't take place until May and June when it's filed with the council. The council, as the legislative branch, doesn't have a role in the development of the budget. That's determined through the work of this committee, and then separately on the municipal side with the city departments through the department heads interacting with myself and the finance director to determine what we can afford for those departments. But a lot of the constraints that we face in the budget development are governed by limitations that are imposed on cities under state law, whether it's the limitations of Prop 2.5, the limitations of our ability to increase excise rates, which we charge the most for under state law right now. We operate within those constraints, and if we're able to capture new growth, which we usually estimate around $1 million of new growth each year, that is above and beyond what we can factor into our revenue projections for establishing the budget for the year.
Understood. And then, Mayor, I know you and I have had this conversation because it's come up as you were negotiating with different bargaining units, and then obviously we had a series of negotiations here on the district side. But there was a lot of folks that I think had reached out wondering, why we couldn't excise or levy more taxes on folks that are visiting. Does the municipality currently have any ability to unilaterally kind of change how we leverage dollars that come in from visitation?
So when it comes to things like our hotel excise and our meals excise, we charge the most that we're allowed to under state law currently. The Municipal Empowerment Act was filed by the governor. It would allow us to assess a little bit more. If that law passed and we assessed both of those excises to the highest level possible, it'd be an additional $1.2 million for the city, which is definitely helpful. I don't know the status of that legislation making it through the legislative process right now, but outside of that, we can't unilaterally impose like a local sales tax or a local income tax or a local ticket tax. Anything like that would require a special act from the legislature, which we've made requests for, and I know you've been supportive of with Senator Lovely, but it's a challenging process. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just think it's important for the public to understand that there is limitations on the municipal side that are outside of the control of this particular committee. And I think, if we had the option here as a committee, we'd try to do everything we could to tackle those local revenue options. So just turning back to the consultants, I guess one of the things that I'd be interested in understanding was around kind of the savings themselves. In your modeling, I've heard from the superintendent that these were relatively conservative projected savings, but I just want to understand from you all, like by way of process, like exactly where you think like the boundaries are with respect to what we could save in more aggressive modelings and reductions that might happen as a result of mergers or consolidation.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And part of what this stems from is we did not want to give you a everything is best case scenario picture that then wouldn't necessarily come true. So as you're noting, these are somewhat conservative. So for example, one of the things that the financial savings projections had for a merger, they did not include regular classroom teaching positions at all. So there's no teacher changes in those savings in term. There are sort of one or two specialists, but actually not even a whole school's worth of specialists, because the assumption is that we would still want to maintain all of the same kind of services and learning opportunities in the merged school. And we wanted to be really conservative with that. So, for example, if you had 2 schools that each, I'm making up an example here, there's no specific case in mind, but if you had, say, 2 schools that had each had 2 4th grade classrooms, but when there was one school, and that is the amount of students that would be, even in Salem's lower number of students per class, would only be 3 classrooms, that might be one fewer teaching position. We did not include any cuts or savings from any kind of scenario like that, because that's sort of highly individual to each school merging, and was just sort of, as I said, we wanted to not give kind of the rosiest best case scenario estimates, wanted to give you the most conservative estimates as sort of a floor. And sorry, Superintendent.
Yeah, I'd also just add, like I've said this in a couple of the forums, we also want to be prepared if there needed to be some transitional supports, like additional staff that we would want to add, certainly in year 1 of a merger. Like you want to, that to be in consideration. The plan is to obviously have a transition team if the committee votes to move forward with the merger, and out of that could come recommendations that would require depending on what the committee wants to do in terms of like additional staff to support a merger. There's also unique student needs, as Dan mentioned, that we'd have to consider. So I think we felt comfortable being conservative just because we didn't want to overpromise that there would be more savings. Do I think there will be more savings? I do think there will be more savings, but I think we want to be careful because we don't, we want to be respectful to this as like, these are about individual needs of children. These are about individual needs of communities. These are about individual needs of, depending on, the innovation model, depending on, because in some of the scenarios involves innovation plans like Bentley and with Carleton, those all have to be in consideration, and so we wanted to be careful with what we put out there in terms of savings.
Understood. Thank you.
Members? Member Hoffman?
Hi. I have a question about the STRIDE program and the space and availability, but also kind of tied to that I thought of later was the physical therapy and the OT, like they kind of need some space. Is that incorporated in some of these rooms? Or like, did you think of that in the bathroom, like the being able to get to the bathroom and use it privately?
Dan, I can take that. I can take that question. So on with the STRIDE classrooms, I know there are 3 STRIDE classrooms at Horace Mann. They do not currently. None of them have bathrooms in them, but they're proximal in some of the cases. I don't anticipate moving any of those STRIDE classrooms. We don't anticipate collapsing any of those programs or shifting them. There is also a designated OT and PT space that, largely, and Jade, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is used for the STRIDE program there, but it also is used for other students at the school. I don't anticipate moving that space. That's a very needed space for the students in the program. And there are also a couple speech offices that mainly serve as STRIDE. I don't anticipate any of that, if a merger happened at Horace Mann, being impacted at all by that. I mean, those are core parts of a program that would need to stay in place. And so I don't anticipate any changes there.
Superintendent, can I add also?
Yes, sure.
Just for clarity, we just want to say very clearly, none of the scenarios involve dismantling any of the special education programs. They would all be preserved in their spaces.
Any questions? Member Cornell?
This is for the superintendent. So in the high school building redesign conversations, we have a civil engineer who has given us some recommendations for like how you could improve traffic flow in that space. And I think regardless of what happens, like, if we leave everybody on that campus exactly where they are, I would like to see if there's a way that we can implement some of those recommendations sooner rather than later. The folks' traffic concerns around that space, like I understand that shifting the start and end times will help that, but it's not lost on me that that will be a construction site. And I think we have to think really carefully about the traffic. We all, we've all talked about how terrible the traffic is, but the fact that it's going to be a construction site is going to make it a little bit thornier. So, I'd like to some reassurance. I don't know where it would come from. I don't know if it's like, Mayor, you sort of bringing this up at with our architects, or if either one of you see this as a possibility, being able to get in there and manipulate those traffic ways soon.
To clarify, you're speaking about making that roadway two-way down to near the golf course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see why we couldn't do that regardless of what happens here. I think there are issues with traffic right now, obviously, there. I have no doubt that it can accommodate the number of kids that we would project to have there if there was a merger, based on my conversations with the traffic consultant on the project, who is, by all accounts, an expert in this. He's made it very clear to me that they had already projected out this many kids on the campus, because we were planning for a 7 to 12 at one time, and so I have no doubt that it can be done. To your question, though, I think we would have to sit down with them and start planning for that. Again, regardless of what happens in this decision, I think the traffic situation continues to get worse there. I think would be some. We'd alleviate some of it with the change in start and end time if we can do that. But to your point, I don't think that's all the issue. I think there are other things that we can do. And while we've consulted with Salem Police on different ways in and out, I think we need to rely on that expert. And he did say he actually did say that he would get us a proposal for reviewing that now, if that's something that we wanted to do. So I expect to receive that from him.
Yeah, I think I would want to be thoughtful about how I'm not a traffic engineer, but like everybody in Salem who drives, I am a traffic engineer. I would be concerned about how that roadway would ultimately intersect with the area right in front of the high school. So we'd have to be, I think, maybe thoughtful about how that kind of operates, because that's where the issue would be.
I have an idea for that.
Oh, okay.
Traffic engineer right here.
Speaking of traffic, if you looped it around, you can loop around where the buses drop off, because they're high schoolers, so they can get dropped off where the bus zone is. Like, you stop for the bus and you wait. But if you were to loop around and go back, they would go out the same way they came in.
Yep.
And then have Horace Mann go the opposite way, so they go to the top.
I know what you're saying.
Around the other way, and then you make a no left turn. Sorry, folks.
Solved it.
During the school hours there.
We'll talk about it. Yeah.
You're a traffic engineer.
I had another question.
Yeah, Member Hoffman.
One about, let's see. Sorry, I haven't heard anything about the calendar, but would we be able to put all the schools on one calendar versus having two separate calendars? So would that alleviate some of the stress of having a school open when others are closed?
Yeah, you could, definitely that can be a condition. I mean, you'd have to look, it's right now a part of the Carleton Innovation Plan that they have a separate calendar. But there's no reason why the committee couldn't revisit that part of it. I think Carleton would say there are specific dates that they need to plan for. But I know I've talked to Principal Weaver about, the fact that that could be looked at if that was a concern. I'm not sure there's tremendous extra costs to it, but it is logistically very frustrating. I mean, there's challenges logistically.
Yeah.
We have so many different calendars that now over time, the only school that is dramatically different is Carleton. Most of the Bentley has chosen to follow the district's calendar. New Liberty follows the district's calendar now. So that's helped a lot. But there's no reason why that couldn't be adjusted. Obviously, it'd be a conversation with the school about how to do that in order not in so much as we don't impact the continuous progress model and the need to have the scheduled meetings that they have, the grade level shift meetings that they have, or the programmatic shift meetings that they have. So I think that, but it's doable, I think.
Other questions? Member Cornell?
I have a question about if the pre-K programs were all located at Carleton. That came up in the presentation. I do have a question about bathrooms there. And then I have a follow-up to that. So I know Carleton has 2 rooms with in-room single occupancy bathrooms. And then there are, the school's much smaller than other schools, so it's not like you're running all over the place to go to the restroom. But how does that impact our pre-K teachers?
Well, there's no requirement to have bathrooms in any classrooms that we have. And so, essentially, you could have pre-K and kindergarten, and throughout the district, while most of the pre-Ks, I think, have bathrooms, and a lot of the kindergartens, not all of them do. And like at the Head Start program at Horace Mann, Pathways, they don't have bathrooms in their classrooms. So it varies. That being said, if you ask teachers about bathrooms in classrooms, they would feel very strongly about having bathrooms attached to their programs. And I know the ECC teachers would say that. If any of them were here right now, they would say, don't listen to what he's telling you, because we need it in our space. And that's one of the reasons they do love the ECC space, is that those all the classrooms that they utilize right now have bathrooms. There's also a need in there's changing needs in some of the classrooms as well, and so some of them have set up closet spaces that are used for changing that are essential for some of the substantially separate classrooms. And so we'd have to be cognizant of that. Again, there is no requirement to have them. It is a preference, and it is obviously for, if you're trying to herd a lot of children, I don't know if that's the right word exactly, but to manage a group of children, 20 students or 18 students, to go to the bathroom, it's very hard if you have to go down the hallway to do that.
Yeah.
And so I know that the teachers would feel very strongly, and that's one of the reasons they don't want to have to leave the ECC space, is because they feel, while it's not the the most glorious building they've ever seen, they really appreciate the fact that there are bathrooms in every classroom.
I just wanted to have a follow-up, because I know that, or make a follow-up statement, because I know that members of the community have asked about the potential to have, a pre-K K center and go, 1 to 6. And there's a community member here who left, but who always has this idea of putting, our 7 and 8s at Horace Mann. And so I just want folks in the public to know that these are conversations that we've had pretty consistently over the years about the benefits or drawbacks of having a pre-K K grouping together. And part of what we've learned is that this is where the space constraints are so tight. So when we're talking about, okay, maybe 10 years down the line, if we can apply for another MSBA grant, build a school that accommodates, X number of students, then we might be able to kind of game out or, to plan for some of these bigger ideas that we actually can't execute because of the space constraints that we have right now. So people bring up really good ideas, I think, around this. And I think Sean Earps has made a really compelling case for pre-KK center. But again, it's just, we're really confined by the spaces that we have. So we do have, we have talked about all of these great ideas, and many of which have been echoed by folks in the community. But those might be sort of longer visioning things. And I have heard that from people that let's, can we see what that longer term visioning is? And I think absolutely that's something that we should be working towards.
Yeah, could I just add to that? I mean, I think if you, The teachers, the pre-K and the preschool teachers would say they would love to all be together. The majority. I wouldn't say universally. There's a few that have sent emails that suggest that they don't want that. But the majority would like to all be together in one place. We do struggle right now with professional development because they're on different schedules. You know, Bates and Horace Mann have a different schedule than the ECC, and that presents logistical issues with getting teachers together. And there's some isolation for the teachers at Bates and at, and at Horace Mann that they're not able to all be together. I think there is if you talk to our coaches, the providers, to a person, most would say, like, you got to bring them all together. Many would say add kindergarten to that as well, except that is a much harder thing to do because of the number of classrooms. And I don't know that that's as universally wanted by the feedback I've gotten from the community. What is pretty universal is they would love to see all the pre-K and preschool classrooms together. They'd also like to see more of those classrooms. The only exception would be the Bentley pre-K because it has to be attached to the dual language program unless a committee member Campbell feels differently, but it seems that all the guidance is that should still be attached to the dual language program.
If I can,
Go ahead.
When talking to different experts in the district, even if it was pre-K and K altogether, they estimated about 7 bathrooms would be sort of a pitched number. And if there are 2 already and it's not including K, that leaves us maybe with 5, maybe a few fewer. And we did estimate out with facilities that it'd be about $25,000 to $50,000 per bathroom. It sort of depends on where the pipes are and where the water is already and how far you have to go to route it. But while that's a big number, given that we're dealing with a lot of bigger numbers, that is an option that doesn't add up so quickly as many other building estimates do.
So just to clarify, so the cost scenarios or the cost savings that are reflected in the scenarios that were presented in the fact base don't reflect.
They do not
investments
reflect
for
that
revenue.
because the ECC domino and the series of dominoes came after. So we focused on the elementary school core buildings, not to say the ECC is not essential at all, but given its unique features, we focused on pricing out mergers or co-locations of the K-5 spaces first.
Member Cruz?
I think this one's for the superintendent. I know, and Elizabeth, now that I think about it, the assistant superintendent, when we started kind of the process of negotiating with our bargaining units and getting to the finalization, I know we've talked about a variety of different, like 3-year horizons for what the budget deficit looks like. Obviously, we had a really rough budget cycle last time around. We have 2 in front of us that are coming really quickly. Could you all just kind of name, I think I've heard the superintendent say that this particular budget year is difficult, and this is one of the impetuses for coming forward, bringing the recommendations, but then you talked about the subsequent budget year. Like what is the projected kind of deficit for next year? You know, what are the factors that go into that? And then additionally, I know you presented kind of like, here's the menu of options of things that we would have to consider because, again, as a school committee, we can't raise the revenue, we can't do the things that are outside of our control that we would have to take a look at if we were looking to kind of close the budget gap in these next 2 fiscal years. But just wanting to understand, like, what's the difference in doing something this year versus next year? What does that budget deficit look like over the next 2 years, just so that people have the full picture of kind of what we're up against there?
I could start and then jump in. I mean, I think this upcoming year is of significant concern because we know we have a contract that we have to fulfill. You know, it's known what our cost obligations are, particularly around personnel, which is the biggest driver of the budget. And then we have an opportunity to renegotiate the contract with our largest bargaining unit. And that could change somewhat the landscape moving forward. You know, we don't know, but next year is particularly challenging. The fact is, right now, I mean, I'm just as worried about future cuts to our entitlement grants at the federal level. We don't know what's happening at the federal level. I hate to say it, but I think it's pretty bleak where we're, what we see both at the state level in terms of, and Mr. Cruz, you may know a little more about the projections at the state level, but certainly we are concerned about, the $5 to $6 million we get in title grants. I mean, with the Department of Education being dismantled, that could have big impacts on our future years. It's really tough to predict, but it doesn't look. It doesn't seem positive. The outlook doesn't seem positive at this time. And Elizabeth can jump in. I would say, look, either way, even if I was having this conversation in, good budget years, we are running way too many schools for the number of kids we have. That is definitive in my mind. From the moment I arrived here, I said that but it wasn't the time to look at that because we were in the middle of COVID at that moment. The reality is we weren't going to make changes to schools at that moment. My first day was in the middle of COVID. But as the reality is, in order for us to do the kind of work that we want to do, even in the best of budget times, to be innovative, to be able to invest in programming, the quality programming and the high interest programming, it costs money to do that. And we are running too many schools for the number of kids that we serve. And so, the recommendation, whether it happens this year, whether it happens a year from now, 5 years from now, unless we have major spikes in enrollment, which doesn't seem to be, the forecast, I do think fiscally we're going to be in a tough position for a while. Now, obviously, it is more extreme when the conditions are like they are and the constraints are like they are right at this moment across the state, across the nation. Somebody mentioned it tonight, and this is happening everywhere. And it certainly is our portfolio of schools is certainly, it's exacerbated in this moment in time. But, even in the best of times, if we want to be able to spend money on our innovative work and build on, the successful things we're doing in schools, it's very hard to do. I think our central office has to be bigger because of the number of schools we run. It's a lot to manage to run 11 schools. Given and certainly harder given the constraints that exist right now. I don't know if you would add to any of that.
The only thing I would add is just we've estimated for next year it's between $4.5 to $5 million. That's the gap. We don't know a number of things, but that feels like it's right given what we know about our personnel costs. Our contract expires, so we don't have that same level of certainty for FY28. Our contract with our largest bargaining units expires in FY28. So, and I think I would just underline what the superintendent has said. We have not factored into these projections the absolute loss, if that were to happen, of federal money. So that is not included in our estimates.
Thank you. And then appreciate the answers and the clarity there, Superintendent. I think the one thing that I'm going to shift gears on the work that's been done in the district previously regarding transitions. So I know that as a committee, right, we're in charge of the governance. You're the chief academic officer under state law. Could you just speak to kind of your thoughts on how you would manage a transition in the event of a merger? Like, who are the folks that are represented on those transition committees? Because I just think, I'd be interested in understanding, how you're thinking about putting that together, and what does that process look like? Is that through the end of the school year? Or is that something that also continues throughout the summer? Just trying to get a sense of how that worked when you were doing the Salts-Collins merger as well.
Yeah, I think this is more complex than that, and so it would require a team of educators, families, students, district central office members to meet regularly and consistently to plan every aspect of it. There has to be, it depends on the context of each school a little bit in terms of their identities, but we want to be able to take the best of both school communities. I think you'd want to have, and I shared some of this in one of the forums we had, we want to have events scheduled where communities were coming together. We'd want to obviously get feedback and input, but having a steering group serve in that capacity and represent the stakeholders would be critical, and that would be, led by member of my team, obviously whoever's identified as the school leader. I think it would have to go through the summer and into the fall, or as long as needed. But you want to make sure that there's strong footing and there's an opportunity. You just don't drop it in the summer. I mean, I think you have to make sure that it receives the attention, the transition that it deserves all the way through the fall, and if need be, beyond that, to make sure that it goes well. And then there has to be reporting out on metrics. I think it's important to survey people in the school community. It's important to look at some of the outcomes that we look at as a district, not just MCAS, because we don't get that for a while, but we have internal data. We'd want to look at attendance. We'd want to look at we'd want to look at discipline rates. We want to look at our internal assessment data. We use the STAR assessment, so we want to look at that. And I think those are all pieces that we want to look at. I don't know that it was as involved with Salt and Stall. It didn't involve as many children. It wasn't an entire school community merging with another, which represents, I think, a much stronger identity of a school, and that has to be honored and respected. And so, it would have to be a substantial part of my team, my work, for the remainder of the school year into the fall.
Thank you for that, Superintendent, because I think, one of the things that we've heard from members of the community at the different forums was around, what's the role of the committee with respect to the plan? And I would just name, I think that this committee's pretty much adhered to the fact that, there's a red line between what your role is as the chief academic officer and administration, and then what our role is on the governance side, and that the school-based management, it best lies with you folks. And I'll just name that, there's a lot of school committees that operate like 1993 never happened, and we didn't remove the management functions that school committees used to have. I think that it's a good thing that we did because, quite frankly, there's a reason why we have a superintendent that's been retained. I think district leaders that are doing good work and school-based principals that people really respect and value and that we're actually keeping in the district. And then I think educators who, believe in what we're doing and then the families too. So, I personally just, want to note for members of the community that may be wondering why, the school committee in particular isn't named in that particular process is because there is a boundary between school-based governance and school-based management, and we want to respect that line because we know how important it is for the folks that are licensed to lead and educate in schools to do that work, and obviously with opportunities for information. I just named superintendent, and we have this history here in the committee when we did do the closure with Bowditch, that we did do that type of monitoring, and I think it was really helpful for members of the committee to just know the progress that was being made, but then thinking about sunsetting that to make sure, so if that is a factor for folks in reconfiguration, that there should be some type of sunset on when we stop examining how folks are adjusting to their merger, because eventually, any merger that might take place, reconfiguration or closure, those school community members become a part of that school community. So revisiting that over and over again just, I think, tears back the wounds. We have to find a way to honor some of those pieces, but I would just put that out there for the committee members that would be here, is that was something that we did the last time around, and I thought that was important.
Can I just add a few more things to that? I think it's also important that meeting with the teachers union will be very important. We've had, I think we have a good working relationship. We've dealt with some difficult situations and trying to be respectful of staff and making sure they're placed appropriately and respectfully. It's not an easy conversation, but that is a conversation that would happen right away if a merger was decided on. I think that's important to note as well. I also think that it is. I think it's also important that students have a voice in this. I think that cannot be underestimated. There are very specific student needs that would be part of this, and I think I've heard from parents individually. Some of them have spoken at forums that would have to be taken into consideration very, very carefully. There are unique situations that we would want to work towards and work through. And I also would say I think we have excellent school leaders, and I think school leaders loom very large in any changes like this. Every one of our principals has at least 3 years of leading a school in Salem. The majority of them have been administrators in Salem for a lot longer than that. And so I think we would rely heavily on what I think is an excellent group of school leaders, the best that I've been associated with as a superintendent. They know the community well. They have good connections. Not once have I heard any negative. Maybe people haven't shared that at the podium, but I mean, I've heard very positive things. People feel very strongly about their school leaders, and I think we are in a very good place at this moment with leaders who have, a good pulse on their communities and have worked well with their schools, and I think we have to rely on them. I do rely on them a lot because I don't know the school communities as well as they do, and I also think we have excellent educators who know their schools way better than I do. And what we saw here at Collins is the success of the merger was because of the school leader here, the school leader on the sending side, as well as the staff. I mean, I can't say enough about the staff and how welcoming they were and how, they stepped up to say, these are our kids. All of these kids are our kids. Nobody is, these are not Saltonstall kids versus Collins kids. These are all our, Salem children. And I can't take any credit for that. I've got to credit the team here at Collins, Principal Softic, and every one of the teachers from Saltonstall and Collins that has made this as successful as it could be. That being said, anytime you have a transition like that, it's not perfect, right? And there has to be the willingness to continue to adjust, get feedback. And I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be rosy in every aspect of it. Do I think it can be successful? Yes. But it's going to require a lot of back and forth, feedback, input, from all stakeholders to try to get this right. This involves people. This is not a business. We're not running a business here, but we have children, we have staff. These are families with real feelings and real emotions that have to be taken into consideration very carefully, in a merger or transition like this, which is significant. It isn't small. I do want to call that out. I don't just think that this is something that is run of the mill. I think it can be done well if people put the right attention to and focus on what needs to be done for kids.
Thank you. Questions, Member Cornell?
Is it appropriate to make a comment? That's not a question? Okay. I just wanted to because this is the first time that we've had an opportunity to chat about this as a body, that I don't really actually think that any of us here needs to be reminded of this, but just to state that we really can't disentangle equity from budgetary concerns and the way that we allot those funds. I don't think that ignoring equity would not align with the values that we articulate as a body every time that we come in here. And the research, and I think folks have been talking about research around school mergers or school closures specifically. I just want to kind of speak to that a little bit. I don't want to suggest that a closure and a merger are apples to apples. They're not. The research around closures is pretty specific. Closure results in student disbursement, which we've been very clear about the fact that we are unwilling to do. So a merger is a different animal, but just because it's a different animal doesn't mean we shouldn't take into account that research. The research is important. And so I think it's important to keep it in mind. But the most consistent conclusion, and you all are the experts if you want to speak to this a little bit more, but the most important conclusion that I take away from research on closures is that they disproportionately adversely affect students of color and low-income students. And so because we are an equity-driven body and we are an equity-driven district, and that is part of our vision and mission, we have to be thinking about that, whatever decision we come to. And in this district, the highest percentage of students who are low-income, English language learners, high-needs students, and students of color are disproportionately at Bentley and Salts. And sort of in the middle is Horace Mann. So, again, we are equity driven, and so I just want to make sure that we're thinking about, as we always do, that the students who need the most get the most, and in this situation, the students who need the most and who are most vulnerable and likely to experience those long-term adverse effects that folks are talking about, those are the students. And I want to be really mindful of what any kind of merger, the effect that might have on those students, whether that's leaving their schools or making new friends or adjusting to a new model of education. That just has to be in the forefront, I think, for all of us.
Workers.
Well, thank you, Member Cornell, for, I think, raising those pieces. Certainly appreciate the focus on equity, and I know, based on my conversations with all of you over the years, that's what we center. And then I think the other component of this is we're the employer of record for the district, and we also have an obligation to our people as well. So, like, I know I'm weighing heavily, what I'm hearing from staff within the district. And I think, hearing from the superintendent that, in the last year, even with the fiscal deficit that we experienced, we were able to offer positions to many of the folks that had a position that was eliminated. We were able to keep people in kind of different and creative ways, and I recognize that part of the impetus for the superintendent proposing this and the consultants as well is trying to preserve the most number of people so that we can keep the educational models that we offer in the district. I think one place that I would just name as a concern for me is I think when we consider advantages versus disadvantages of each of the options, including a delayed decision on this, either by way of trying to bind the next committee to take something on, or not making action in this particular year, waiting for kind of all those unknown factors to play out with the other sources of funding, is that we would be talking about fundamentally changing the working conditions of all the schools within the districts, and then eliminating a lot of positions based on what the superintendent provided. So I think we've done in the yeoman's work of trying to keep a lot of good folks within the district, and I am keeping in the back of my mind the concern just around the number of staff cuts that we would make if something isn't on the table. And I would just ask that members of the committee think about that part of our responsibility, because I know that there's a lot of staff that have dedicated many, many years to this district that are wondering kind of where they fall and where they're situated, depending on where we land with the conversation. So that's something that is top of mind for me. And, Steve, to your credit, I know you mentioned that there's sensitivity around that. So, I appreciate the fact that, that is what your commitment was at those public forums, is to try to ensure that we're keeping the most amount of people that we can, and trying to protect, what we've been able to accomplish thus far with the team that we have in place.
I have a few follow-up questions that I wanted to, a lot of the questions that I have actually have been addressed, which I appreciate the other members raising. This was a question that had been presented to me by a parent or a family. Or do any of the scenarios require the hiring of new administrative or non-classroom staff due to a larger school population in the building? And do those costs, if so, are they reflected in the calculations that are presented in the presentation?
No, none of them would require any new hires. I think if anything, it would be the kind of thing the superintendent spoke about a minute ago, where you would refrain from making a cut to leave sort of an augmented staff, staff proportion in a specific area. So in other words, you just wouldn't cut something if you wanted to keep extra support in a certain area, but nothing would require additional staffing. And this sort of reflects staffing of the schools that are in Salem already of the size that two merged smaller schools would be.
So Member Cruz mentioned this. This was another parent question I had, which was, is there a scenario in which relocation of an elementary school program could be phased over time, so the currently enrolled students would complete their years there, but without enrolling new kindergarten students going forward?
Do you want to start?
You can go ahead, but I was on the wrong side.
Thanks. So that's a great question. We really appreciated that. So there's a couple, in theory, yes. You could do a phase-in over time of a merger. There's a lot of reasons that I think make that really challenging. And so just the simplest way to think about it, I think, is if you phased in a merger over multiple years and one of the schools in particular is staying where it currently is, then that one school would be all the way part of the merger, and then the other school would be partially merged over a whole number of years, which would be really, truly, I think, bizarre for all of the staff of no matter which school they were part of before. It's much simpler, not just simpler, that's not even the right word. I think it's a lot more doable and humane even to do things all at once, as opposed to having sort of a 5-year transition where sort of one building is slowly shrinking and they're slowly moving into a merger with another building. Also, because one of the things that was really important to you all in terms of doing things as a merger instead of a disbursement, I think part of the idea is to not just say you have one community that is taking on another community. You have two communities that are coming together, that are bringing their values, that are bringing their rituals, that are bringing their traditions, and that you can create a new school that reflects all of those values and rituals and traditions and all of these things, with those two communities coming together to sort of chart what do we want our new one to be, what do we want to bring with us. And I think that that's much more difficult to do if you have a gradual phase in of one school gradually moving into another school.
So I appreciate that. So one of the things that's maybe not, it's a non-zero sum is something like an innovation plan, right? Like, so if a school is being merged that has an innovation plan, if the receiving school is having an innovation school move into that building with them, what happens to families if they don't want their child to participate in that innovation plan? I mean, would they?
So it depends on the innovation plan and whether or not the innovation plan allows for backfilling of seats. So in Salem's case, Bentley does not, you need to qualify basically by your Spanish language fluency. You could backfill those seats, but you can't catch up the mislearning of not knowing Spanish if you're a native English or only English speaker or another language that's not English or Spanish. Whereas in the innovation model, given its trimester model, there are ways to imagine, although that have to be carefully planned and structured, where kids can be integrated into that model as is, as modified, as Dan discussed those components, and those are his wheelhouse, not mine. But I think it would depend on which innovation model, and that would be part of that conversation. But not all innovation models in Salem in particular are the same in terms of the complexities of those opportunities. So if Bentley were to go to a space or a school were to join Bentley, upper grades in particular would be a challenge because students would be ineligible to stay potentially, which feels, I suspect, a lot more like a closure of that school because they would essentially be kicked out for not being eligible to enroll in that new school versus being able to create that new entity that Dan was describing.
Can I just add a couple of details to that? So just to build on that, that's if the school was going to be wall-to-wall dual language in the case of the Bentley model. Right, because students who are in, say, 4th or 5th grade or 3rd or 4th or 5th grade haven't had the preparation, as Sarah was saying, to be able to move directly into a dual language immersion situation. You could have some monolingual strands and some dual language immersion strands. We have understood that as explicitly not the goal, that the goal is explicitly to have the school be completely a dual language school. So I'll just say that's our understanding. In terms of the Carleton model, and I apologize if I was answering the wrong question. So if your question is about do a merger and then gradually phase in the model to completely, if it was Carleton, to completely include the entire school, I think it would be possible to have a partial if it feels to the team that's coming together to design the combined school. I think it could be possible to say, if you're coming from Carleton, things stay in the continuous progress model, and we slowly grow that out if we want to make it the whole school, but we don't necessarily throw everybody who was in the other school, if it's merging with another school, into that model if it either isn't something that community is ready for, or if it's something that the educators who have been part of the continuous progress model are like, don't just try to flip a switch overnight, gradually work into it. I think that kind of a phased approach would be possible.
So related, this is probably a question for the superintendent. You had mentioned that choice would be prioritized for families at impacted schools who might want to send their child to a different elementary school. Is that, does that apply to families at both ascending and receiving school?
I think it should. I think it should because I don't think, I I think parents should have a choice, given that, say, their school was being merged with an innovation plan that they don't think is a good match for their child. They should have a right to make another choice for their child in a choice school system. And so I think it should apply to both schools that are part of a merger. And we'd give them priority in the, you asked me about the transition before. That should be part of the transition plan, is soliciting from parents whether they want to consider another choice for their child somewhere in the Salem Public Schools. We do have space, as I've shared before, throughout the system, so there may be interest in going to another school because they don't think that the merged school is the right match for their child.
Any other questions for the superintendent? Oh, yep. Miranda.
I don't know if it's for the superintendent or committee member Cornell or Campbell or the consultants, but we've heard from Carleton parents this idea that the model can't work with a much larger group of kids. So just want to maybe get a perspective from some of my colleagues here on the school committee or from the consultants around, like, do you believe that this model can continue to be successful when adding a lot more children to the mix?
Do you want me to take that question?
I think you all should start,
Yeah.
especially since Beth Ann, I believe you helped write
And Kate,
it.
you can jump in on this if you want. I mean, we believe that the answer to that is yes. I don't claim to be an expert on the continuous progress model, but I have had conversations with Principal Jellison. Kate and I have had conversations with both Principal Jellison and Principal Weaver, who know the model well. Principal Jellison, because she was part of the initial writing of the plan, and obviously Principal Weaver as the principal of the school right now. I do believe that it can be expanded. I have no reason to believe that it can't be. And in fact, I've said this before, when I first got here, Principal Jellison at the time was asking me to find a way to expand. She really actually wanted to move the school because she wanted there to be more strands. Again, I don't want to use that word, but more classes per grade level, because she felt that it could benefit more kids. And the demand was high. So, at the time, again, that was during COVID and as we were coming out of COVID. But every indication I received from people that know the model better than I do is that it can expand. It would have to, look different. That's why there'd have to be some, planning. But the good news is we have people who know it well and who feel like, in fact, Principal Jellison has told me before that it could work better with more staff because it gives you more flexibility in how you utilize your staff and meet needs of more kids if you have more classroom teachers, you have more reading specialists, you have more that gives you more flexibility. That's the guidance that she's given to me over the years about the model, that in fact it could even be more beneficial to be in a bigger space. So I have no reason to believe that it couldn't be, but like anything, I would ask for people that know it well. We have staff who, that's the thing about the Carleton model, is that there are many people within the district who were part of writing it, the plan, who have lived it, who have implemented it for a lot longer than I've been in Salem, and we'd want to rely on their expertise to do that. Kate, I don't know if you've been here longer than I have, so I'll...
Yeah, I would concur with everything you said. I don't really have much to add other than to say that I think, discussions around expanding the Carleton model have predated even Beth Ann Jellison talking about it and moving to Saltonstall. There had been discussions many years ago around the Carleton model kind of being part of the solution to some of our underperformance at the elementary school, and should we be expanding that model to include more students? I think if you look at the innovation plan, there is a staffing model in there for 2 strands. I don't see why that couldn't be expanded to, include a greater number of students. So obviously it would take some planning. It's going to take folks to come to the table and look at that together. But I agree with the superintendent. I don't see anything inherently, presenting as obstacles in the innovation plan itself that says, oh, there's like a cap on this. We can't, expand it beyond X number of students.
Yeah, what I've always found interesting is that even though it's an innovation plan, there's nothing in the model that requires there to be an innovation plan. There isn't. We're still adhering to the contract that we have with the Salem Teachers Union. It meets all the aspects of our contract. It's good practice, right? It's good practice. Ironically, Elizabeth Pauley, before she came here, was part of an organization that gave Carleton the Posen Prize for excellence in innovation. And at that time, I think even Elizabeth, before she worked here, asked, why don't you expand that model? And so, while there are, I would say Carleton, we have work to do with their data right now because their growth isn't as good as some of the other schools in the system. The reality is, though, over time, right, there's been a lot of success at the school. There's been a lot of interest in the model. Everything that parents have shared resonates, right, in terms of meeting kids where they are and the needs of kids. Although I would argue that that's really good practice, right, and should happen more universally and consistently for kids everywhere. I do think, Carleton has systematized it in a way that, that I think, should be more instructive to how we do our work. Although I do think that it's also, regardless of what happens with the merger, we do have to look at the model because the staffing ratios are really low, there relative to the other schools. So there are some questions about equity there. And I also would point to the growth on MCAS is an important data point. And Carleton's growth right now, and I've talked about this at school committee meetings, is stagnant. And so we've got work to do to tweak aspects of the model. But that being said, over a lot, there's a body of work there that is important for us as a district, regardless of what happens, to honor, to maintain, and hopefully to expand, because I do think generally it is really good practice for us as a school system.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? I'm sorry. I'd love to see some data, if we have it, on the number of students who, or families who maybe have selected Carleton as their first choice and did not ultimately get there. What is the demand for the program, maybe over time, relative to the other schools? And you don't have to find it now, but if somebody can provide that to me, that would be helpful.
I have it for last year's kindergarten enrollment, so that's imperfect. I just want to name that, and Laura Saad can correct me if I'm wrong, but we can look at it over time, but it'll be the last 3 years worth of choice data, given sort of a shift in systems in the Welcome Center office. So just to name what
we moved away
over
from
time
paper to actually being
no way.
So what over time can look like, I just want to name as bounded at 3 years, which given pandemic and everything may or may not be a meaningful metric anyway. I did sort of pull last year's kindergarten choice data, and I matched it to the student's individual current school. So if there were transfers after they were assigned and before mid-October, there might be some discrepancies. So I just want to name that. So 68% of those who ranked Carleton as their first choice now attend it. That's 28 out of the 41 families who picked it as their first choice. In terms of the other schools, 90% of those who ranked Bates as their first choice now attend it, 56 out of the 62, 48% of Bentley, 30 out of the 62 who chose it first, 88% of Witchcraft, 69 of the 78. Horace Mann, it was 73%, 36 of the 49. And Salton Stall, 80% who ranked as their first choice now attend it, 20 out of the 25. So if you're looking at raw numbers of kindergarten families choosing it, Carleton was the second least chosen by number of families.
Member Cruz?
This is for Dr. Drake and I think for Assistant Superintendent Carboni. I know that I've had the opportunity to meet with the Bentley families a few times, and then members of the committee have taken their calls and have gotten some advocacy from them. There's a similar question around the innovation plan there, dual language. What are the current efforts underway to expand the model, if any, across the district, or increase the access to dual language? Are there any efforts at the middle school level, at the high school level? Like, what's the current thinking with the team in the multilingual learner department?
So we just submitted the proposal to DESE for the expansion to the middle school, and that plan was accepted. So it's a viable plan. We'll be working to implement that, and that's been a work in progress for the last 3 years by a task force. So that's where the expansion has focused, because the kids are now ready to move from the Bentley to middle school. And there's been the internal expansion of sort of rolling up to the grade levels in the current plan. So that Bentley hasn't sort of expanded its number of strands, but has been more focused on the expansion across the grade levels. They've really been doing a lot of work around curriculum the last couple of years. For the first few years, they were more focused on writing curriculum, and in this last year have adopted curricula that they think is suitable to the program. So working with teachers to get acquainted with that and use it as the primary instructional tool. So that's been sort of the current work around expansion.
Member Campbell?
Just a clarification on what you had said. You said that Carleton was the least chosen, but if I'm understanding correctly, that is a combination of both those who chose or who applied to the school but then ultimately did not select it, but also students who did not get into Carleton, like listed it as first but didn't receive a slot. Is that correct? Or
so it was the second least preferenced as their first choice.
Okay. Gotcha.
So of all the kindergarten families who picked their first choice, I went through all of last year's data to see, did they end up there or not?
Yep.
And 41 families put Carleton as their first choice. Saltonstall is the only school where fewer families put it as their first choice.
Okay.
And 28 of those 41 currently attend Carleton.
Okay.
So it is the second most competitive, which is not a word I want to use, but
Right.
to think we're in college acceptance season, so I'm thinking of that. Numbers, so it's at 68% got in versus 48 or attend, which is a proxy for getting in, imperfect as it is, compared to 48% with Bentley, but it's also one of the least preference as the first choice. So there's a demand supply disconnect there that's more stark than other schools.
Sure. Thank you.
Any further questions? So I want to provide maybe some more time for open discussion with the committee members around the specific scenarios, any strengths or disadvantages that stand out to you in looking at those. Are there scenarios that weren't evaluated by the consultants that we think should be put on the table for consideration? Member Campbell?
Yeah. Mine is not so much a comment on what I think holds the most promise or not, but I think what I keep coming back to is what we hope to get out of what is the unfortunate reality that we're in. My hope is that we would walk away not just having made amends for our financial situation that we're in, but to also do some things that we've been talking about for a long time, in the hopes that it would move our vision forward rather than feel whether it was or was not a hasty decision to be perceived by the community as a hasty decision because of budget shortfall. I know that's the reality of what many, many districts across the Commonwealth are facing, and we're no different, but I know we've also had lots of conversations around expanding access to our most innovative programs, including potentially a standalone ECC, making our schools the most accessible that we can to the populations that tend to select those schools. We've had conversations around school choice as well. And what I struggle with across all of the scenarios is that while they address aspects of what we've sought to do, I have a hard time seeing something that will allow us to capture the full vision of what we're hoping to do. And so in full transparency, that is sort of where I am stuck. I recognize that if we delay enacting a path forward, we may not have innovative programs to expand. We won't have, the staff to be able to do this work. We'll be having to make some really very serious and very detrimental cuts, particularly around staffing, and that will seriously impede our ability to have those innovative programs that we're hoping to expand. But that being said, recognizing the need, but also trying to see how are we balancing all of these things that we've identified as important and all of these things that we hope to get, and finding it more than just a cost-saving measure, although that is ultimately also a component to it. And so all of that to say, that is sort of where my mind is at currently and what is swirling around in my mind. And I do, Member Cornell, I'm really glad that you brought up the original conversation that we had around some potential alternatives. And I guess what I'm stuck on is there a way, yes, there are some large scale shifts that are involved in that plan. However, is there a way to do a more gradual approach to it where we ultimately have some pieces that we know we want to move around, and come to perhaps a more long-term, or make more clear to the community a long-term vision around those types of things? As in, is there a more phased approach? Not in the sense of a phased approach across a merger. I wholeheartly agree. I think that's hugely problematic. But is there a phased approach to the reconfiguration itself and what moves where and what goes where? That perhaps we're not thinking, or we have not had a chance to fully discuss and dissect. That's where I'm at.
Member Cruz?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the question. I think I'm in a similar position to Member Campbell in that I'm still processing some of the community input that we've received. I think still diving into the fact base, and would still love the opportunity to meet with Dan and Sarah. A little busy this holiday season, but I promise I'm sending that email tonight so that we can get some time on the books for some follow-ups. I do have, in full transparency, an interest in thinking through that similar line of reasoning around how do we think about the phasing of this particular type of decision for, I think, a variety of reasons, including the academic vision of the district, but also some of the external factors that right now are unknown, and that I do think merit some longer-term kind of understanding for the full committee and those that will transition on, because I do think those folks, it's going to take them some time to get up to speed on what conditions we're passing on to them. So those are the things that I'm wrestling with as I go through the rest of the process. So on my part, I think it's not so much about where I view significant advantages or disadvantages, or I want to see new scenarios introduced. I think I do still want to have that conversation with Dan and Sarah to kind of get a sense of what that actually looks like. What are other districts kind of doing to approach phasing in as they're dealing with similar budgetary constraints? So I think on my part, I'm processing still, and certainly I'm getting the information that I need from the superintendent and from other folks in the committee, which I think is super helpful. But that's kind of where I'm at.
Member Cornell?
I agree with. I think Amanda's point is a good one, because I've found myself, when community members are asking this question, like, well, yeah, these are a lot of the things that we've been outlining, and sort of in some ways it feels like kind of chasing your own tail. Like, it's like you have these ideas, we don't have the space, we don't, you know what I mean? So, one thing that I would like to see is I know this is a lot of meetings in a shorter period of time, but I do think it would benefit us as a body to be able to see it all in one place, kind of what some of the things are that we talked about. It would be good for us to talk about that in front of the community, that like we have in fact had conversations about what if we, had one through 6, right? What if that was what all of our elementary schools look like? And a phased approach to some goal that maybe doesn't get attained while any of us are sitting on this dais, but to really outline that for everybody, I think is important. And again, I would really like to remind myself. I felt like that when I put the timeline together. I was like, oh, right, we've really been through a lot of these conversations. I do apologize to the public that I didn't do that sooner. I should have, because it was certainly helpful for me. But I think going through that same process of kind of looking at all of the things that we have tried to game out, think about in terms of what's best for our kids, 5, 10, 15 years out. We have had those conversations, but I think of sort of maybe more mapping or of what that looks like would be super helpful, again, for me. In terms of making a decision, I am not comfortable pushing a decision off. I think the implications of that are going to be really devastating for our kids. I worry about the financial toll and the human toll that's going to take if we delay a decision. We will lose teachers we want to keep because they won't want to stay in an environment where they feel unstable. And I think that we've had these conversations long enough that I'm willing to kind of assess, continue to dig into the information for the next few weeks. But I personally, I don't have any major concerns about the 4. There are some that I like more than others. But the thing that really keeps me up at night is delaying catching new members up to speed and delaying a conversation that we've been having for years. It's a tough decision to make, but I think it's ours to make.
Yeah, Member Campbell.
I would also just add, and I apologize, I don't believe I've seen this, but I also think I don't believe this happened at any of the at the forums that I missed while I was away. But I think having a real honest conversation about the state of the Bentley building and whether the repairs would in fact require not being in the building as discussed. And again, I apologize if this was discussed, but I think that is a huge factor of it. If you have a program that's housed that the plan is to go wall to wall, which is what all the research supports, but also it is the most complicated to backfill seats without significant disruption to the balance of the two-way model and the family commitment to it or the family interest in it. That to me feels like the hardest and most immovable piece of like you have this building that may or may not need to be taken offline, that may or may not be able to be occupied while kids, or may or may not be able to be occupied while the repairs are taking place, that houses a building that is the most complex to merge. Like to me, that feels very challenging to overcome. So I think that for me, I also need to I need for us to have a conversation about what that might entail. And what the possibilities around that would be. I cannot wrap my mind around those two. It's like the immovable object and the unstoppable force in my mind.
Yeah, no, we don't believe that the building needs to be vacated to do work. It can be done while students are in the building or over the summers. That's a conversation I had with our facilities director just to confirm that we don't believe that the building has to be vacated. Dan and Sarah weren't sure initially, but after having a conversation with our facilities people, we do believe it can be done while kids are in the building.
I'll just add, I think from a budgetary perspective, thinking about our capital planning, if there is a future configuration in which the Bentley continues to be in our portfolio for the foreseeable future, it has to be our priority for the next round of MSBA applications for the accelerated repair project. Member Cruz?
And I think one of the other things, Member Campbell, that was raised at meetings was, I think I had asked the question when we initially got this presentation around what was the status of the MSBA and kind of that inquiry about the repayment schedule, whether or not there was options for forgiveness or forbearance. I think the short answer was that there's no option for forgiveness or an exemption, but that as long as the building continues to operate for an educational purpose, we don't have to pay back the funding. So we talked about that with the parents at Bentley, and then additionally during some opportunities to connect with the community. So.
Well, there's not going to be a vote tonight, but this was, I think, a helpful opportunity for us to have a conversation about the scenarios and the fact base that was presented to us. I'm not sure if any of the committee members would feel comfortable saying they want to take any of the scenarios off the table at this point, but we're going to continue this conversation with 2 more opportunities for public engagement at a minimum. Member Cornell suggested an additional one, but are there closing thoughts before on this conversation? Member Cruz?
Thank you, Mayor. I just think with respect to your last point around committee members taking things off the table or narrowing down, if you will, I just think for the purposes of how we've deliberated in the past, as we think about like the construction of the agenda, I'm happy to work with you on this. But I think all the options, with all due respect to the consultants, it's just I think all of them should be listed on the agenda, and then when it comes time for the deliberation, once we get to the motions, I think you'll probably reach a place where members have consensus, or we don't have consensus, and then people can put forward the motion for the option that they want to see people take a up or down vote on. So I would leave it that way, just so it's clear that, again, we have, because the core question here is whether or not to reconfigure the schools, and then we have these options, including the option to not take any of those recommendations, or to delay or to modify. And then I would just ask that if members of the committee do come up with any alternative scenarios, that you just petition the agenda by reaching out to myself, the superintendent, and the mayor, so that we can work on getting that on the agenda, so that if that you're planning on making a motion on something that's not being considered at this moment, that's how we would do that normally.
Well, if it's a scenario that's not been studied through the process at this point, then I think that we should probably have a dialogue about what that might be before it shows up on an agenda.
Yeah, so I would just ask that folks, if you're planning on submitting anything that's not included, that you reach out and let folks know. Even if you're planning on modifying, one of the proposals, we would need to see that well in advance. That would need to be sent to the members.
Member Miranda.
So at this time, would it be appropriate for us to kind of share what scenarios we're looking at?
If members feel comfortable, then I think it's perfectly fine now to, if something is a big red flag for you or you think there's a great opportunity, this is an open discussion.
Okay. Not to put anybody on the spot, but Amanda, I am interested in hearing some of your thoughts, or specifically around the dual language program and equity, and just seeing the percentage of kids that are just looking at the demographics and the data around where our kids that are attending the dual language program are coming from. That's something that I'm really struggling with, and I can't. I have heard that at some point a previous body had discussions around whether the dual language program should be at the SALTS building, and so just want to kind of, I guess I'll put it out there for everybody, so I'm not putting you on the spot, but I'm curious to hear what committee members' thoughts are around that.
Member Campbell.
So I think what's really challenging about that particular question is, it's my understanding, please jump in if I am misunderstanding the demographics and enrollment, because I've got a lot of numbers inside of my head, is that while yes, there are a lot of students from Bentley who live in the neighborhood that is around Saltonstall, so the same is true for students who attend Saltonstall as well, that they have a large percentage of students from the community. And so I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable pitching one or the other as this is a great move for the community, because it is true that both schools are enrolling from the same community. That being said, as a dual language practitioner, my default is always that putting schools in communities that are research-based and designed for particular communities and are most effective for particular groups of students, especially high-demand programs like dual language programs, is always, in the end, although it may feel tricky, is always one of the best things that you can do. And having, your dual language program far away, not far away, but far away in Salem standards, far away from the community it's designed for and intended to serve and does in fact serve, is a little complicated. That being said, again, Saltonstall also serves that same community, and I'm sure, just because I'm immersed in the dual language world doesn't mean that those families don't also love their schools and perhaps choose it for more. I think there might be an assumption that they choose it for walkability. There are perhaps many reasons why they choose that particular school, and I wouldn't presume to know why that is. So that's sort of my mind right now between those two, because I've had the same question as well. And then, I'm sorry, there was a second one too that I forget. What was the second point?
I guess it was around the history with.
It's my understanding, and I would defer to Deputy Superintendent Carboni if she has a more detailed recollection of it, but I do believe that Saltonstall was on the short list to receive the dual language program originally, but it ultimately ended at Bentley as it was coming out of the,
Horseman. It was Horseman, Salts, and Bentley, right, were the top three.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? What was the reason for choosing the Bentley building?
It's my understanding that as it came out of charter, we knew that there would be a transition in leadership, and so it was an opportunity to hire a specific dual language principal, and that it was also still, although not as walkable as Stultz, more walkable. Just kind of in that period of transition for a school anyways, that it was an opportunity to not have an additional school in transition. Is that fair?
I think that's right.
All right. We are going to hold some additional opportunities for the public to ask questions and engage with the committee about this conversation. The first will be on Saturday, December 6th at the Community Life Center from 1 to 3. There's no formal presentation. This will just be an open house style opportunity for people to come and talk with members of the committee. It will be posted as a meeting, but there is no presentation or agenda outside of having an opportunity for direct questions and conversations. And then on Monday, December 8th, as the superintendent mentioned, we'll be holding a Q&R webinar on Zoom. The link will be posted at salemk12.org and sent out to the families through Parent Square. So,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're not able to join the webinar, you'll be able to get the recording after the event by visiting salemk12.org/reconfiguration. And lastly, you can always continue to email reconfiguration@salemk12.org to share your feedback or questions with the district and the committee.
Yeah, we'll make sure we put that out tomorrow to the public. We just wanted to wait to share it at this meeting, and then we'll put it out to the public tomorrow.
Sorry to be that person. I know it's late. My child's also here, and I'd like to get her to sleep. But I do still kind of feel like a bit unsure. Like, how are we? I agree with what Member Campbell had said about like having a vision, and I also agree with what Member Cornell had said around like feeling strongly that we need to make some type of decision, and hopefully that ultimately gets us closer to some of the things that this body and then previous bodies have talked about in terms of a vision. But I'm still like how are we going to go into this meeting on the 15th and then like make a decision when I still feel kind of unclear about like where my colleagues are sitting with this. Like, I heard from Member Cruz that it sounds like you would prefer to have more time, and I'm still feeling like not a lot of deliberation happened in some weird way. So like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to be clear, I was speaking to the idea of phasing, Not so much that I need more time. I don't have any more time on the committee, to be clear, so.
Right,
With respect to deliberations in the past, when we've had to make decisions of kind of this magnitude, making the decision usually happens the night of, and someone makes a motion, and then people vote up or down. So, getting a general sense of where people are going to be at, that's not something that you're probably going to get tonight or in advance of the meeting, so that I would level set that expectation. It's going to happen on that evening, that you're going to get a real sense of where people are. I would just remind members of the public, members of the committee cannot engage in serial communications. They can't conduct the business of this body when we're not all present in public at a publicly posted meeting. We fully comply with the open meeting law, so it's that day is the day where people need to come in ready to make a decision of some kind. And when that motion comes forward, that's when people will, I think, make it known. What I've seen people do in the past is before we get to the motions and resolution sections, they will name, where they're at. So if it's an item on the agenda, like you're seeing today, it's under superintendent's report that we're discussing elementary school reconfiguration, and I'm sorry, it's 9:47, so I'm a little punchy, but usually people would name it before. Some people have named it before they get to the motions and resolutions. Some folks wait right until we get to motions and resolutions, don't really say what they're thinking, and just vote yes or no. So it's really up to the members of the committee to kind of come into that meeting prepared to make a decision.
Mayor.
Yep, Member Cornell.
And I, just on the visioning piece, I can, as I did with the timeline, sort of go through some of those prior meetings and look through as many notes as I can, both in, this iteration of the body and then before you were on, when Kristen Bengala was on and Member Fleming, to kind of at least try to outline some of the things that we've talked about for a while. Because as I said, when I did the timeline, those things all became a little more clear to me that we had these sort of broader visioning conversations. But, as a body, you're always just constrained by money and space. So I can take a crack at kind of putting that together. Obviously, the way it works is that, we can't deliberate. I send that all to a blind CC to everybody, and then we can't have that. But I still, again, I don't love the idea of cramming another meeting in, but I would like a meeting to talk about that if we could do it before the 15th, because that, for me, I actually have pretty strong feelings about the four that Dan and Sarah presented. I'm not particularly interested in the other options. Those are the four that I'm looking at carefully. But I think for me, I would be much more comfortable having that vision outlined when I pull the trigger, so that everybody who comes to that meeting can see where we're headed and not just the decision we're making in the moment.
Member Campbell.
I would just add, while Member Cruz and I have gone through a lot of complex issues and challenging votes in our time on this committee, many of them have been more straight up or down without an array of options as immense as these. And so I can appreciate that some folks feel like we have not really had time to dig into every single one of the options and weigh the pros and cons and do our, for me, I'm more of an internal processor. I'm collecting information. I'm really thinking deeply about it. But it sounds like it might be helpful to try and find perhaps like a committee of the whole style. I know for me, especially in some of our more challenging votes, this format of sitting in this half circle is really hard to kind of connect and figure things out. And so perhaps a committee of the whole with no expectation of a vote and just like an opportunity for folks who can. I know it would be really challenging to find the time, but it does seem like that might be more helpful for especially our newer members, and that might be perhaps if we could perhaps, I can't believe I'm suggesting this, but if we I can appreciate that it is not as simple as, do you like this idea, yes or no? It's more of a like, in relation to all of the other ideas and all of the other possibilities, do you like this idea, yes or no? And it's more almost like a ranking process and I think that makes it really tough.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that a committee of the whole format would also allow us the opportunity to maybe evaluate each of the scenarios against that vision rubric. You know, like, is our goal expanding early childhood access? Which of these really helps us achieve that the most effectively? You know, which, you know, financial sustainability is another one of those metrics, which provides access for the most students to the programs that we want to try to provide access to, which
Right,
addresses
because I have
equity
my own
challenges.
internal ranking of
Yep.
what is or isn't the most important to me, and there may be compromises from within what I personally view as the most feasible or the most beneficial. And so, you know, hearing other input, you know, we've had the opportunity to get a ton of community input, which has been great. But it is, in this particular case, to sit here with, you know, a 7-person body and have absolutely no idea what anyone else is possibly thinking or how they might rank things or how they might respond to my own rankings in terms of priorities for the district is really challenging.
Can I just suggest that I know we have had a lot of public feedback, and I don't want to limit any further public feedback, but if we struggle to find a date for a cow, I think it might be a good idea to kind of take one of those times that we've all committed to, if we're all feeling like that's a priority.
Yeah, we'll coordinate on time with Shirley. All right. If there's nothing further. Subcommittee member Miranda. Oh,
No, I was about to make a motion to
oh,
adjourn.
no.
We
you
can't.
jumped
Oh,
the
we
gun.
can't. We got more business.
10 more items.
Yeah.
Should we
Subcommittee
let-
reports.
Can we let people go
What?
home? Can we take a quick recess so people can go home to their kids?
Oh, yeah, okay. Is there a motion for
I
2-minute
take a
recess?
motion for a 3-minute recess so that everybody can get out of here while we make other votes on stuff not pertaining to reconfiguration.
Just tobacco on school property.
Yeah, it is one.
Yep, motion seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Oh, let's remove. Yes. Committee reports. Seeing none. Motions and resolutions. The request for the transfers.
Move to approve the budget transfer request and the amounts listed on Assistant Superintendent Polly's sheet.
Motion made by
Second.
Member Campbell, seconded by Member Cornell. A roll call vote. Member Campbell,
Yes.
Member Cornell,
Yes.
Member Cruz.
Yes.
Member Hoffman,
Yes.
Member Manning,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Transfers are approved, unanimous. Member Cornell.
Yeah. Motion to approve policy AA, policy AC, policy ACR, policy ACA, policy ACE, and policy ADC for second read.
Seconded.
Motion made by Member Cornell, seconded by Member Campbell. Under discussion. Seeing none. Roll call vote. Member Cornell,
Yes.
Member Cruz,
Yes.
Member Hoffman,
Yes.
Member Manning,
Yes.
Member Campbell,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Second reading is approved, unanimous. Announcements. Seeing none.
Move to adjourn.
Second. I thought I had it.
Motion made by Member Campbell, seconded by Member Cornell. Roll call vote. Member Hoffman,
Yes.
Member Manning,
Yes.
Member Campbell,
Yes.
Member Cornell,
Yes.
Member Cruz,
Yes.
and myself, yes. We're adjourned. Thank you.